Oh, I'm sorry. All righty. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to open the October 14th school committee meeting. This meeting is being held virtually through Zoom. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by the town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. One concern is that the chat function allows a parallel text conversation to a board's public meeting. Chat is essentially running commentary that is occurring but is not moderated or followed by the chair. All participants and listeners may not be aware of comments being made because some meeting participants join by phone and do not see these conversations. Another concern is conversations between residents within the chat room, which are not incorporated into the public record. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the Zoom meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone. So that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion, we ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom, or if you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participants return their microphone back to mute. Okay. So we have a consent agenda from September 30th and oath of bills and payroll.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the September 30th meeting. It's 2021 and an oath of bills and payroll.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Brad?
Brad Austin votes yes.
Justin?
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Jen?
Jen Gold votes yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. Okay, this is our first opportunity for interested citizens. We have anyone in the?
I don't see any raised hands. No.
No one.
All right, we'll move along to recognition. So we'll start with Stella Austin with our student representative report.
So hi, my name's Stella Austin, and I am joining and assisting Maddie Sheffrin as a student representative for the high schools. So Shaker Lane has had their first community meeting outdoors this last week, and they talked about how to welcome everyone at their school, and they plan on decorating signs of welcome in different languages for families to view them as they enter the school. Also, Shaker Lane participated in their first Safe Routes to School International walk or bike or drive up to school day last Wednesday. And lots of families took part in promoting safe biking and walking to school. And Shaker Lane looks forward to hosting at least 2 more of these events throughout the school year. In Russell Street, the 5th grade students completed their walking field trip to the town cemetery and did a scavenger hunt there. My little sister Phoebe has not stopped talking about it. She had such a great time. It was a success. Also at Russell Street, Mr. Roy, the custodian, was the most recent recipient of the Russell Street School Excellence Award. So congratulations to Roy. We're very happy to have him as a part of our community. Also, Russell Street has welcomed 2 new student interns from the Littleton High School, which has been a great cooperative effort with the high school and the elementary school students and teachers, and just a very great addition to Russell Street School. At Littleton Middle School, they are preparing for their MAP testing, which is happening this upcoming Wednesday during the early release. And parent-teacher conferences will take place on the 27th and 28th, which an email with more information will be sent home next week. Also, most clubs have started this week at the middle school. So if you have a child, or if you want to reach out, please reach out to the sponsor teacher for more information. Things have been in full swing at the high school as well. This week is our homecoming week, so we've been having lots of sports games, it's felt more normal at the high school. We're having our spirit week. We're getting ready. The homecoming game is tomorrow. The dance is Saturday. And just everything's in full swing. The clubs are in full swing. The theater is preparing for a show that they're coming up. And the National Honor Society is starting to run drives and things like that. Just things are very ready. Sports-wise, it's been kind of the week of senior nights at the high school. I know that the field hockey senior night was last night and they won their game. And Tuesday night was the girls' soccer game field night. Whoa, senior night. And they won as well. So congrats on that. And also at the high school, the PSATs are on Saturday. So we wish everyone who is participating luck.
Awesome. Thanks, Stella. You're a better public speaker than your father. Very good. All right. Kelly, is there any other public recognition we'd like to?
No, Stella, you did a great job. I really don't have anything to add. It's just wonderful to hear all the activities and extracurricular experiences our students have opportunity to take part in. And I'm looking forward to the high school homecoming football game tomorrow night.
Awesome. Okay. Moving on. Our old business enrollment update. Dr. Clenchey will give us an enrollment update as of October 1st.
Excuse me, Dr. Clenchey,
Sure.
one moment. I believe if you're on LCTV, the video is not rolling properly. So if you need to watch, if you could move to, if I'm correct, Comcast or Verizon. I just wanted to note that to everybody. Everyone can hear us. It's just the video is frozen. Thank you. Verizon's best.
All right. Thanks, Dorothy. The enrollment sheet for October 1st is included in your package. Resident students, 1,564. And with school choice, our enrollment is 1,658. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Any questions from the school committee?
If you can just remind us, I don't have it right in front of me. I'm sorry, Kelly. Remind us how this is like year to year versus last year, and where we about where we expected. I think we expected around 80 to 100 school choice. Is that right?
Right. We're pretty well right on. Last time I did an enrollment presentation was the first part of September.
Yeah.
And we were, I'll look at the sheet here. We were up by 6 students more than we are now. So, I mean, it's typical to have a bit of movement throughout the year. Choice projections were very close, very pleased with that. So I'm really pleased with our enrollment. I think we're in a good spot.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Clenchey. All right, move on to presentations. We have a few middle school students with us who are going to give a presentation on classes, clubs, sports, and lunches at the middle school. Which one of you guys is going first?
I'll be going first.
Okay, introduce yourself and let us hear all you have to say.
All right, my name's Aria Watchsunder. I'm in 8th grade, and as for advisory, which we've begun in the mornings during Flex Block, advisory is seen as a way for teachers and their students to get to know each other more than they did before, and a good way to connect. As for the classes are in full swing, and multiple classes have already gone through different units, and I think Ishan will be expanding on the sports and the clubs and activities.
Over to you, Ishan.
So I believe the sports and clubs have started really smoothly lately, and I'm really glad that the sports are back because I'm an 8th grader and this is my last year in the middle school, and I really believe it's an experience to be on the middle school team, and I really like I really enjoy the bus rides and everything. And it's really like a real good start before we go into high school and we start playing for JV and varsity. And clubs have been rolling really smoothly. They're mostly starting around this week. And yeah, on to Dash, which will talk about our COVID protocols.
All right, Dash, you're up.
Okay, so COVID protocols have been going well. Kids have been wearing their masks in school at all times, and we're safely distancing in classrooms. And we also, with lunches, even though we've been split up, we do get to see our friends a lot during the day, so that's going pretty well.
Awesome. You guys are doing an excellent job. Anything else we want to add? We good to go? All right, thanks, guys. Oh, Ishan,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I believe the lunches today in the middle school, we just got like in the gym, we have like tables now, which I believe is like really taking us back to like 6th grade before COVID. We get to sit right next to our friends. It's really fun.
That's awesome. And now, Ishan, are you playing on the middle school soccer team?
Yeah, I'm actually the captain.
You may not remember this, but I think I coached you when you were in 1st grade, and I taught you everything you know. Just so you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, moving on to new business. I'm sorry, presentations. We still have school improvement plans by Shaker Lane and Russell Street School.
We're going to start with Russell Street School first.
All right, Cheryl Temple will give an update on Russell Street. Thank you.
Waiting for the slides. Thank you, Steve. First of all, shout out to Jason Everhart, who is willing to share his slides with Michelle Kane and myself. So it looks familiar. Thanks, Jason. Next slide. So at Russell Street, we have 2 areas of focus this year. Social emotional learning is our first area of focus. As you can see on the slide, we have been able to reintroduce some things that we weren't able to do last year. So our classes all have morning meeting where kids are able to get together on the rug, if you will, and talk about, the day and how things have been going. And most classes have the closing meeting at the end of the day, at least sometimes, some days during the week as well. We've been able to reintroduce group work and activities within the day. Our think tank and our library are in full swing. We weren't able to use the think tank last year, but classes are going to the think tank now, thanks to Heidi McGregor and also to Starla Hazen in the library for having those things back in full swing. We have objectives for each grade. They're called can-do statements. And Andrea Romano typed them all out, and the teachers are able to go through and check off how students are doing. So the can-do statements at each grade are in the areas of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. For example, a grade 3 can-do statement says, I can understand my own strengths and challenges. And another example is, I can communicate my needs and feelings verbally. So those are some examples for 3rd grade, 4th grade's different, 5th grade's different. But we're really trying to focus on where the kids' strengths and weaknesses are in terms of social emotional learning. Additionally, our playground is in use this year. We're incorporating outdoor snack breaks and lunch as much as we possibly can on days that the weather cooperates, and also currently when the bees cooperate. We have had multiple spirit days. We had a football day. Some people wore their Buccaneers jerseys to school. We had a Red Sox day, and of course, we're doing Halloween planning. And additionally, some of the classrooms have had their own spirit days. We've had a couple of classes earn pajama days and things like that. So our social emotional learning goal is moving right along. Next slide, please. The second area of focus, and we've talked about this a lot in the spring and last year, was really entering this year, meeting students where they are. And there's several ways that we're doing that. Our UDL professional development, that is a district-wide professional development. That professional development really reinforces the need for universally designed lessons. We have the PD that Beth has assisted with in the district, and we're also reinforcing that professional development during building-based professional development and also during staff meetings. One of the focuses at Russell Street also is trauma-informed instruction. It's an area of concentration for our staff this year. We did an activity yesterday with an article from Educational Leadership magazine called "Trauma is a Word, Not a Sentence." And the staff read the article, we discuss it together, and then we discuss it as a full group. In terms of meeting students where they are, we all know about this. We have MAP testing as one of our data points. We also have Acadience testing as another data point, both in reading and math. We're really concentrating on flexibility with pacing throughout our classes. And we have a fully developed SST program at our school to monitor students who need support. So those are our two areas of focus for the year. Next slide, please.
Cheryl, can I interrupt you right there? I'm sorry. Can you explain to me, what does flexibility with pacing mean for your class? Does that mean that the whole grade's not trying to stay, or it's student by student? Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So when the teachers meet together and they talk amongst each other, some of the classes, I was saying in an admin council meeting this week that one of the teachers just said to me on Friday, October 8th, a third grade teacher said, "My class felt like everybody was in sync for the first time today." And that was October 8th. And she and I were commenting that, in a previous year, that would have probably been a comment she would have made on the second or third week of school. And so the teachers are noticing that some classes are moving at a different pace. And so we're really trying to be flexible depending on the class makeup. Some classes are taking a bit longer to just establish their routines and get going, and other classes have moved along a bit quicker.
Well, I guess that was my question. So you're talking about moving through the curriculum, or just establishing class rules and norms?
Kind of both of those things. I think we really just, in past years, the teachers were within a couple of lessons of each other for the most part. And then, we found last year that the remote classes found that they were moving along more quickly than the classes that were in-person learning. And we knew that everybody coming back together, that we were going to find that, we were going to have to find some middle ground. And so instead of trying to, rush or go too slow, we're really just allowing people to kind of go along at their own pace. I think it will even out, but we have found that, like I said, some of the classes are really just, still working to get into the real groove of it.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. On our next slide, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. We are still continuing to have common planning by grade level, and that sort of helps with what Brad and I were just chatting about, just for teachers to be able to talk with each other about where they are and kind of move along at their own paces. We do have common assessments. We're working on the Lucy Calkins writing curriculum this year. We're also working on, as I mentioned, universal design for learning. We have added or reinstituted this year some curriculum related field trips, and thanks to the PTA for really encouraging teachers to plan those again. And also mathematics curriculum review is in its beginning stages this year. Next slide, please. In professional development, we're focused on cultural proficiency that we started last year. We're continuing. As I noted, Russell Street is working on trauma-informed instruction as one of our points of concentration this year, and also the UDL is our professional development. And we're continuing to work on that during our building-based professional development as well. Next slide, please. In community and communication, I continue to put out on Friday the weekend update, and there's parts from all the different sections of the school in there. I maintain a Twitter account, as do some of the teachers. Classroom teachers send out weekly email communications and blogs. And after our Adam Welcome visit on the first day of school, teachers are now posting podcasts. I'm feeling a little pressure about that, but they're posting podcasts with their students for their individual classrooms, and that's going really well. And I think last slide, please. Nope, two more. For climate and culture, we're in the planning stages again for some family STEM nights. They were very successful virtually last year, if you remember. And so we're in the planning stages for some family STEM nights again this year. PTA is always a shout out to the PTA. They have planned, they've already dropped off snacks for staff. They're planning bingo night, a book fair coming up. They're really encouraging funding for field trips and for school-wide activities. We have had, we're focusing again still on health and wellness for staff, and we are planning after-school activities for staff as we did last year. And as I mentioned, the Spirit Days have been really successful, and we will continue those throughout the year. And now, last slide. For technology, we do have the one-to-one Chromebooks, and they are used regularly in the classrooms. I know we talked a bit about how we were going to use them this year now that we're all back in session, but students have been using them in classes. Teachers continue to use their document cameras. We did increase the number of large screen monitors in the classrooms, which has been a really great addition thanks to our tech department. We continue to emphasize use of apps and tools to assist in the classroom. And we continue to have ongoing tutorials and PD opportunities for teachers. We are very fortunate, and I know other principals have stated this as well. We are very fortunate to have the tech team that we have. They are very generous with their time to help out when teachers want to try something new. So you know, I think everyone would agree. You never go it alone. Someone's always willing on the tech department to come over and be in the classroom with you and make sure that your tech works on a daily basis. So we really appreciate them. And that's it for Russell Street.
Thanks, Ms. Temple. Any questions from the school committee? Justin?
Sure. I'll just add, thanks for sharing. There's a Hunter Henry jersey on order, so we'll be one less Bucks jersey next time.
What's up with that? What's up with the Bucks jerseys? I think we live in New England.
Once a Brady fan, always Brady. I don't know. I just wanted to say that, thank you for noting and addressing that classroom pacing. I think it's really important that you've picked up on that. And I look forward to hearing more as the year progresses, whether or not we sort of totally get caught up or whether or not we need to implement some strategies or provide some resources. But, hats off for addressing it head on, and look forward to hearing more. I think that's super important. So thank you for your good work.
Oh, you're welcome. I think we'll be in a really good place by the time we get to our conferences are a little bit later. So I think we'll I think things, as I mentioned, I think things are going to even out, and I think we'll have a better idea of that by the time our conferences roll around.
If I can kind of piggyback onto that, to Justin's question, is I really appreciate, again, what you and your team are doing to kind of keep up with the academic side of our students' progress and monitor that and adjust to kind of meet them where they are and bring them forward. I wonder how confident you are about the emotional side. These are younger kids. Some of them are some are in like Russell Street for the first time. Do you think you have enough resources or enough time with the students as teams to kind of get a sense of how they're doing?
That's a good question. I feel like the teachers have really spent the time to make sure that the kids are doing okay. So in the morning meeting and in the closing meeting, all those times, those touch-based times, that's happening. And so I don't think a lot of things are falling through the cracks, which is really important. I can't say enough about Rachel Lighton, who has, she's reinstituting her lunches with kids. That's starting, I think, tomorrow. And so we're really making sure that she's touching base regularly with kids that the staff has identified. But I think the staff in general, our goal really is to make sure that everybody in the school has a trusted adult, just one. And I remember talking to a student last year, and when I said that, I said, well, everybody should have a trusted adult. She said she didn't have any. And it was kind of like, to me, like a punch in the gut that particular student said that. But it really made me think that we had to work harder to make sure that happened. And especially this year, we want to make sure that the kids feel safe and comfortable and that they're doing okay. And so we are putting the extra efforts in place to make sure kids are okay.
It's really good to hear. I know we were all glad to hear last meeting from Jason about the advisory and making kind of a structural attempt to kind of attend to those needs. And I'm glad it's coming from the top in Russell Street as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Brett. Any other comment before we move on to Shaker Lane? Thanks so much, Ms. Temple. We'll move over to Michelle Kane to give an update on Shaker Lane.
Is Michelle with us, Dorothy?
No, she's not yet.
So Matt, maybe we could move on to new business, and when Michelle arrives, we can come back to her presentation.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you.
So our first order of business is public health metrics. Katrina Wilcox-Hagberg will give an update on public health metrics.
Not as fun as Michelle is.
Oh, don't sell yourself short. You're plenty of fun.
All right, here are my slides. I'm assuming you see them.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so we'll just dive right in here. So on the statewide level, this is today's DPH dashboard with the 4 main trends. We are looking pretty stable across the state. Keep in mind that the holiday weekend, the number of tests that were conducted and reported are lagging behind. So we're having that same kind of holiday weekend delay that we always see. So it should catch up soon. But the 7-day average of cases is right around 1,000 per day. Test positivity is around 2% for the state. Hospitalizations have been stable at around 550 per day, and there's a little more capacity in those bed occupancies than we had a few weeks ago. So that is a good sign. And deaths are averaging about 12 per day. This is actually a little higher than we were at the beginning of September. So hopefully that will come down soon. When we look at Middlesex County, this is the CDC community transmission rates. And for the period of time between October 7th and the 13th, Middlesex County has now been classified as a substantial community transmission area. It came down from a high community transmission area. So we are now orange. This has been this way for about a week now. And on a statewide level, it's always good to get some feel for the age group trends. So these are the case rates per 100,000 for the last 2-week period. And this is the last 2-week period between September 26th and October 7th, I believe, 9th, something like that. And then October 9th. And then these are the trends for the last 6 weeks. So at this point in time, the 5 to 9 and the 10 to 14 age groups remain the highest, the age groups with the highest incidence rates over that time period. However, statewide, those rates have stabilized. So they didn't continue to trend up since the last time I presented to the school committee, which is good. The rates for the other age groups have largely stabilized or are actually declining well. Specifically, there's some substantial declines in the 15 to 19 and the 20 to 29 age groups, and which is clearly helping our trends to go down as a statewide thing because they were the highest ones before. So we're holding for the age groups that you guys would be concerned about. Okay, so some local data. This is Littleton's just number of cases reported over the last 2-week period, tracked since June, since the state lifted the emergency order. So Littleton this last 2-week period had 49 cases reported. Between the period of September 26th and October 9th. This is actually our 2nd week in a row of an increased number of cases being reported. And when you look 2 weeks ago, we were at 25. So this is like the first 2 weeks of a month, and this is the second 2 weeks of a month. So we have nearly doubled in that time frame. Some methods of how we aggregate across the areas so we can compare ourselves to slightly larger areas. We do that to make sure that we get a bigger picture since we're so little and our rates will jump around depending on things. So I will be honest, when I look at the trends this week, Littleton does not look like the rest of the areas we track. It is clear that we have something happening that is different than other places. So we have these 2 measures for local data, the average daily incidence rate and test positivity, both measured over the last 2-week period. The last 2-week period ended October 9th. The left-hand graph shows the average daily case rates, which ours was 35.9, which is an increase from 18.3 2 weeks ago. Again, that doubling. And then the state, the county, and the surrounding areas were stable or lower. And I know if you look carefully, our border towns are starting to increase. But when you actually look at the towns that touch our border and their rates, that increase that you're seeing there is actually driven by our town. There was a small increase in Westford and a small increase in Air, but the numbers did not materially drive that change. So we are driving our area, not the other way around. The other graph here is the test positivity, which is an indicator whether we're doing enough testing. It measures the number of positive tests over the total number of tests conducted. So not people. And I know this gets mistaken a lot. This is not people. Test positivity remains low, less than 3% for all the areas around us. But this week, Littleton had a test positivity of 4.53%. And interestingly, we actually had fewer tests conducted in the last 2 week period than we did in the prior 2 week period. So something that would drive up our test positivity. Testing went down, test positivity went up, and we still had a higher number of cases. So we need to be testing more. But we're still under that 5%. So we just look different from our state because our state does a lot of testing. If we can get more testing in, we might be able to catch cases quicker.
Hey, Katrina, I have two quick questions about the testing. One thing, a question about what you just said. How does that number serve as an indication of whether we're testing enough? What would be a good number that would show we're testing enough, and what's a bad number that would show that we're not? So we want to keep test positivity under 5%. So we're kind of at that threshold of like 5%, 4.5% in Littleton. We're like kind of hitting that threshold. The goal is to suppress spread or keep it, it's like sustain it basically at 5%. If you're under 3%, it's kind of suppressing it. So the idea is if you're doing a lot of tests, then you're going to find the positive cases quickly, and they go in the test, trace, isolate system. And you're finding all their close contacts, and then you're finding any positives from there, and they go in the test, trace, isolate system. And over time, there's a decay in the number of positive tests or positive cases that are identified. So when you look at other states, and there are many states in the US that are above 10%, that is a sign that they are not doing enough testing to capture cases quickly, that there's spread happening that is not being measured. So we are still doing a decent job at finding cases here in Littleton. We just something happened in the last 2 weeks, and we're not doing enough testing to find cases quickly to kind of remove, like once you get them out of the system, they're not spreading, they don't have contacts anymore. So it's less likely to spread. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you. I get that. Another quick follow-up question. What about people who, I think it's pretty frequent, get tested in other towns? So they're Littleton residents. I know I have a lot of friends that go to Project Beacon and Framingham because it's 24-hour. Like, does that count in as part of that data?
Yeah, it's all tied to your address. So it comes back to our town.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you could test anywhere, at least in Massachusetts. I'm pretty sure you can test in other states, and it will eventually feed into our data. It just might be more lagged the further you get away from Massachusetts.
Okay, thank you.
Massachusetts has one system, essentially.
Got it.
Yeah, so I'm testing weekly at Salem State, and those numbers are reflected here.
They should be, yes. So Salem State is required to report to DPH, and then DPH takes them, and then we'll report them out by municipality. Yeah, these are great questions. Any other questions about this?
Katrina, how about our school pool testing? Is that inputted as well?
So my understanding, I actually asked this question to Lynn a couple of weeks ago because I was curious about this. So the weekly COVID pooled testing is a screening test that does not get entered individually. But my understanding is that any diagnostic testing that happens with either that second swab that gets PCR'd or any by Next Now rapid tests that are done, those count as individual diagnostic tests, and those results get inputted into the system, and that gets reported to DPH.
That's correct.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
All of the point of care tests get entered, as well as any of the reflex testing that happens in the lab are all entered as individual positives or negatives.
Yeah.
So just so I understand, because I'm not sure I do. So if I were in a test and stay protocol and I were tested 5 times over, a 7-day period, whatever, each of those 5 tests goes into this number?
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
I'll just jump in for a second about that because we actually were at a DESI webinar recently, and they were really emphasizing the importance of making sure that the nurses are entering that in a timely fashion, because some districts that are much, much bigger than us, they might be doing test and stays with, 100 kids. And so they might not be as compelled to enter those negatives as quickly. They might be doing it the next day or 2 days later. But the timeliness of getting that data entered is really helpful. Where on track, we don't have an issue with that. We're getting all of our results entered by the end of the day.
And I could see that my son was actually in test to stay over the last week, and I every morning would get the results of his test. So I know that his test was entered into the system every single day that he was tested. So I know our school is doing it, our district is doing it, which is great, because then I know that data will get moved on to the right people to report back to us. But think about that. We just went through, we'll get into this. We're having a surge right now. We all know we have more cases in our school, and we yet have fewer tests than we did a few weeks ago. So something is not adding up, that we have fewer tests, more cases happening, but we have more testing happening in our schools. So I don't think it's our schools that are necessarily not testing enough, if you know what I mean there. I think it's, there's probably a combination of people using rapid tests over the counter and not reporting them, so reporting the negatives, we'll say. And I'm not sure there is a way to report the negatives on that. So that possibly could be driving this. If we're having a surge and people are using over-the-counter rapid tests, the negatives won't be counted, but the positives would probably be followed up, and that would drive our test positivity up, potentially. I can't prove that, but that is a theory, a hypothesis, as a town. However, they're in school, it's considered a diagnostic test, and it has to be entered due to the policies of test to stay. Okay. Anything else on these slides? Jen, did I answer that? Okay. All right. So then looking at Littleton's, or that 7-day new cases per 100,000 people that the CDC uses, we can track it for Littleton and the state and the county as well. And the state as a whole continues to be, that's this orange line, it continues to be in a high transmission area. It had declined last week, but we kind of hit a pause here over the last 7 days. So we're kind of holding. The county is also doing the same pause, but they just fell below the 100 per 100,000 threshold. So we're actually in substantial when we look at the county, but we're just barely in substantial.
So
And
I'm sorry, Katrina. So that's what makes us orange as a county, that line. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Littleton, I mean, we bounce all over the place, hence why this so jagged little mountain here. But the last 2 weeks, we are substantially high in this high transmission area. If the cutoff is 100 cases in the last 7 days over 100,000 people. When we calculate that for Littleton, this week's value is 235 new cases per 100,000 people in the last 7 days. So when we're trying to compare areas, we are higher than the state and the county. So we are definitely in a high community transmission moment in our town. Okay, we're going to move on to rosier news, which is our vaccination data. So according to this DPH update, 75.2% of all Littleton residents are fully vaccinated, 5.7% are partially vaccinated. So at over 80% have at least one dose. I have to say that the denominators are getting a little more funky the further into the year we go. Denominators are measured at one point in time, and people age into each age group over the year. So if you look at the 12 to 15-year-olds, we now have over 100% vaccinated, and that's probably because we're starting to capture those 6th graders who are aging in. Likewise, we have a very small age bracket of 65 to 74, and they also have over 100% vaccinated, which is weird. History-wise, the DPH has traditionally updated the denominator once a year. They updated it last November. I'm expecting our town's denominator to change sometime to be updated sometime in November if the pattern remains the same. So this may look different in the next coming weeks. Well, I'll let you know if that changes.
But these numbers still look great.
Yes, I have to say, like, across the board, we've made a lot of movement over the last 2 months in vaccination. And I'm very grateful for every person who went out and got vaccinated over the last 2 months. There's been a number of outreach efforts from the COVID working group, direct outreach to our elders in town, bringing the Vax bus here twice. There was a whole bunch of boosters given at the last Vax bus too. So people are getting their third booster dose or their immunocompromised third dose. So the town has done a lot of outreach and vaccinations, and it has shown in our data that we've increased several percentage points at this point over the last 2 months, which is great. I do have to say, I personally, from a data perspective, it would be great to get that direct measure on each school, because when I think about who is at our schools, these numbers may not be a direct representation of who is actually in our buildings. And that's in part because of those school choice students who are opting to come to Littleton. We have staff members who are not residents. And not all Littleton residents attend Littleton public schools. So that might have a selection bias that might change just vaccination rates. So looking forward to hearing at one of the next agenda items about how our vaccination tracking is going, because I think that's a very important measure. And then if we can get good data, we can maybe do some outreach there too, thinking of the COVID working objectives, group objectives.
Katrina, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. I'm just trying to get my head around these vaccination rates and the previous slides that showed relatively high or high rates of community spread. Is the answer just Delta is nasty?
Delta is nasty.
Okay,
Delta is nasty, and we probably do have, because our population is likely higher than this total, we probably do have a more unvaccinated than we recognize in these numbers. There's probably a combination of the two.
Okay.
But yeah, Delta is nasty.
All right.
When it gets in, it gets in.
Katrina, I'm sorry if I missed something. Why do the two columns of fully and partially often add up to more than 100%?
That is because it's a cut point. Like the denominator is as of, I don't know what date. It's an estimate that the state uses. So it's not a perfect estimate anyway. It's based on some prediction models. And we have people aging in over time. So like that, in May, when we had 12 to 15 year olds, most cut points are July 1st, so you had all the 12 to 15 year olds as of July 1st, we'll say. And then over time, the last few months, we've had more 12-year-olds age in as their birthday hits and they're eligible for vaccines.
Okay.
So these are never perfect data. This is the kind of data that I'm used to seeing and dealing with and knowing there's limitations to this. And I think we're pushing the end of the limitations because DPH will probably update our denominator soon. So just don't be surprised if this changes.
It's directional. But are we also seeing that typically close to 100% of people who are partially vaccinated become fully vaccinated? That would be my assumption, but is that a pretty good assumption?
I have seen that the younger age groups seem to be moving in from, so I see movement in their numbers from the partially into the fully vaccinated. There are some age groups here that there must be some data errors that are like they might have gotten one dose in this state and then that state and the data hasn't connected yet. And that's a possibility. And I see that more in like the 20 to 29 age group who they might be away at college and got the first dose there and come back and have one dose. So there are some age groups where I'm like, wait, that hasn't really changed. So I do expect some data error. I don't think this 5.7 will all magically get into fully vaccinated. But you can definitely see movement in and out of partially vaccinated. So I know it's not just stuck at these people are all wrong. Not the people are wrong. The data is wrong for that group.
Okay, thank you.
There has definitely been movement out of unvaccinated and directly into fully vaccinated. When people get J&J, you can kind of see it. And then there has been movement into partially, and then a few weeks later, you'll see a movement again into fully vaccinated. So it's happening. It's just that's a messy group right there. I have to give an update. So the FDA is actually set to review Pfizer vaccine for emergency use authorization for ages 5 to 11. The FDA reviews it at the end of October. CDC will review it at the beginning of November. And in anticipation of that, the town has actually scheduled a vaccination clinic for those age, specifically for those age groups. In early November, I think it's the November 8th, a second clinic on November 29th. And then in case November 8th is too quick and we can't get that one started, there's another one on December 18th. And I think we're going to just hold all 3 dates so that people have some options to get vaccinated if they would like to. So we're trying really hard to bring vaccines to town for those who are interested.
Some great news.
Okay, so let's get into the school data. So I've been tracking the health notification letters that come in and also cross-checking it with the dashboard that is available on the school's website. So far there have been 29 cases reported across the district, of which 20 of which were just reported in the last 2 weeks. This week isn't full yet, so we still have one more day in it. Concerningly, I think everyone's talking about these Shaker Lane letters. So the 10 cases that are, Shaker Lane had 0 cases until this week and now have 10. It's my understanding that there was a pre-K program group, some of which who were identified in test to stay, and then a couple other students who were identified as cases. So that is concerning. And then the other group that I just keep seeing pop up is the high school. And I'm not surprised they have a lot of exposure opportunity with all of their activities, and just being a high schooler is a social time in your life. So it makes sense that we keep seeing a few cases every week there, but there may have been a group there as well that we might have concerns. But so when I think about it, this is the most recent data we have for our town, and it's kind of an indicator of where our town numbers are going to go next week. And so when I look at it, when the 49 number is actually based on the 4 and the 8 letters cases from the school, those are the same 2 weeks. So those 12 cases go into the 49 cases. And when you look at that, there's a higher proportion of cases in the school than there is population for those age groups. So the schools are running a little high when we look at the last 2 week period. And then I see this 12 and it concerns me even more because it's jumped up again. So hopefully we are having a surge locally. It's not just in the schools, it is also in the town, but what happens in the town feeds into the schools, and what happens in the school feeds back to the town. It's a feedback loop. So it's something to be concerned about.
Can you remind me if my memory, or tell me if my memory is accurate or inaccurate, that over the last year and a half when we've been looking at this, one of the most close correlations was between town trends and schools, but did one lag the other, or have they traditionally kind of moved in lockstep together, or?
They moved in, they were very close last year.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I would say that there was a few weeks that were off, as often there is, but for the most part, the schools were mirroring what the town was experiencing. And I have to say, this last 2-3 weeks, we have not been mirroring, the schools are not mirroring the town as closely as they did before. It's a little higher. So when I actually calculate a rate on this, the rates are higher.
Okay, thank you.
That's concerning. Okay, but I do have to say, thinking of our mitigations, we should continue to think of what mitigations might be able to be strengthened, especially in these moments where we're having a number of cases be reported and potential groups of people who are having transmission between them in school. But this is really the first real test of our mitigation system. And I have to say the testing program, from my personal experience last week, is doing exactly what it was intended to do. We had our first positive pool. The nurses followed up with Binax Nows, found the case. The case, was isolated, and then the test to stay program started, and those students were testing every day. And that was in Russell Street. And then I'm hearing, I'm hearing that the test to stay program is working to identify positive individuals. And the good thing about Binax Now is that those are when those tests are positive, you are contagious. So you're bringing contagious people out of the school building, which is exactly what we wanted this layer of mitigation to do. So hopefully, and the idea about this, especially the testing program, is we need to stay, Delta runs fast. Once it's in, it ends, and it's in and it spreads very quickly. So we need to stay ahead of it. And this testing program is one of the ways we can stay ahead of it. So to hear that we found a positive pool before their symptoms, like all these things kind of snowball and help protect transmission events or prevent transmission events in the school.
Katrina, I can maybe shed a little more light on.
I would love more light.
Yeah, it's interesting to note when we look at that one classroom where we had 7 cases, five of those cases were asymptomatic, and without us declaring the whole class as a close contact, I don't think we would have caught all 5 of those individuals. So it's kind of interesting that out of 7, 5 were asymptomatic. In our high school, 50% of our COVID cases have been breakthrough cases, which really does not coincide with the data that we see at this point in time beyond our district. So it's kind of interesting. So I guess in conclusion, we talk about mitigation. One of the best things we can do is encourage as many people as we can to take part in our safety check program, because it's working. The more we have in that program, the better we're going to be in being able to catch cases right away and be able to deal with them.
Kelly, can you say that last part again? How many were breakthroughs?
50%.
50% at the high school. 50% of the high school cases were breakthrough cases. So
So Jen and I are jumping on the same data point. So 5 of the 11, at least 5 of the 11,
5 or 6
were vaccinated and contracted COVID anyway. Is that what we're saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
So that's a breakthrough case, you bet.
That's interesting.
Well, it certainly doesn't align with the data
No.
that's been released.
That's really high.
Dr. Clinton, were they in the testing program that they were found, or were those reports from parents outside symptomatic, all that stuff, ways of identifying cases?
This would be information that was given to the nurses.
Okay. So those breakthrough cases are not through our testing program.
No, not to my knowledge. We've really done very little test and stay at the high school. Our real true test for test and stay has been at Russell Street and Shaker Lane School.
Yeah, I guess I meant the pooled safety checks.
Well,
are the high schoolers, these breakthrough or any of these 11 cases for the high school, were they identified through a positive pool at the high school?
No.
Okay. There are different incentives for those vaccinated. They don't have to be tested, right? But we are seeing cases arise in vaccinated individuals in the high school. It does not surprise me, given schools, especially a high school or a middle school where you're changing classes, you have more contacts, that those are more high stress tests of a vaccine and its effectiveness. So if you're in a close group of people, plus they're social, so those kids are definitely social together. It doesn't surprise me we're seeing breakthrough cases there.
This might be premature, maybe more for Lynn Snow's portion, but at Shaker Lane, were those asymptomatic positives caught by test to stay pooled or some? Okay, test to stay.
Yes, they were.
How many of them? Like, how did that unfold?
So when we identified the positive case, we then defined all of the students in the class as close contacts. So all of the students who were not participating in the test and stay were encouraged to participate in the test and stay. And then we were able to catch multiple positive cases through that vein, thankfully.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick question. This is all really good data, and this is fascinating because I don't, to the best of my knowledge, what you're sharing with us, Kelly, is not available in some sort of database that we can access. So what I'm wondering is if you're able to take it one step further for us, and are you able to tell us if any cases on a weekly basis, if the spread is household? So if we look at Katrina's slide and we went from 4 to, she had a progressing slide with Shaker Lane. Are you able to say, hey, of those cases, 3 were actually household spread, we had siblings involved, or we had siblings involved across the schools, and those cases are connected? Because I don't think that data is available anywhere. And if we're able to share some of the things we just shared with this audience, I'm wondering if we can take that one step further.
I'd be hesitant to take that one step further, just because of confidentiality and the potential for personally identifiable information.
Okay, so we're at the limit.
Right. It would be speculation as well, Justin.
Okay.
I mean, you reach a point in time where you're trying to put a puzzle together, and the pieces aren't fitting exactly the way they should. And when we get to that point, the validity of our assumptions is questionable.
Yep, sure. All really good stuff.
I can say, Justin, I can say that there is definitely a mixture. There's a mixture of cases that we are finding through our program and cases that we are being informed about, and that are, household or community related. So it is a mix.
Okay. Good stuff. I'm glad to hear that we're catching cases through test and stay, and that other students are staying at school because they're continuing to test negative. And with the population at the high school and what I believe to be the vaccination rate, it's not necessarily surprising to me that if we've had that many cases, about 50% of them are going to be breakthrough. So thanks for sharing all the information.
And Katrina, before you go, I guess more of a question.
I have a few more slides too.
Sorry, I'm going to let
It's
you
okay.
slides.
Is it about this one though? Is your question about?
Going back a bit to the community transmission rate going up, et cetera. I mean, we're one of the few communities in our surrounding area that have mandated mask wearing. And I was hoping that would make a bigger difference. And I want to be clear, I think it is making a difference, but there's something else going on out there that are driving these rates up. And the only thing I can think of, and again, I'm not an expert in any way, is these conditions must be occurring when people aren't wearing masks, because they're wearing masks every time they go into a business. So do you have any advice for us as a community as we move forward? And how do we bring these rates down? Because we're masking and when we're in public buildings and businesses.
So yes, I've this is a tough one, right? So what is happening according to the contact tracing information that Jim Graffey shared with the Board of Health last night is that the cases we are seeing among our school population are arising mostly from social gatherings. The initial case, not necessarily the ones that happened in that pre-K classroom, but those individual cases that are happening seem to be linked by social gatherings. He specifically called out carpools, so transportation either to school, sports, to whatever, kids just being kids, high schoolers driving around together. That was one place that he called out, and he also called out sleepovers. So, which makes sense. You're spending a long time with people in a shared room, whether you're sharing air without a mask on, that would be a high risk timeframe, especially if you're unvaccinated. So we can talk about ways to make these social gatherings safer. I have a few slides for that, but at the very end, because I do think it's time for us just to remind ourselves about these public health measures. But the idea of having a mask order in public settings is because we know people are doing what they want to do outside of these settings, but it's really important, especially for a school or a business where these are people's livelihoods or education access, things like that. What we're trying to do is to make it so that we don't have an outbreak in those areas by using all the tools we do have available. so that people can still work, they can still go to school, they can still do those things. Is it perfect? Nope. Masks are one of our layers, not the only layer. So I do think and given these school cases, every time I see our school cases click up, especially like this last week, where we know there was an in-classroom number of cases in the classroom that they're not related. I know that all of those households now have higher risk of becoming a case in the next couple of weeks. So given the number of contacts we have at school, we got to do everything we can to just prevent a transmission event, because then that goes home to parents, that goes to, it exposes a teacher or a staff member, that exposes a coach, that exposes whatever the kid is doing, that adult that the kid, babysitter, Tiger's Den, like it balloons out very quickly, amazingly quickly. And eventually you will hit people who are at higher risk for the really bad outcomes, including parents. Like every single one of these Shaker Lane kids has a vested interest to make sure that their parents stay healthy. So, and the others who care for them. So masks are not perfect, but they are one of the layers where we can slow spread. Or the other thing they're doing is they're filtering the amount of virus coming back to you that you are inhaling, and therefore, infect your cells and start replicating, which then hopefully will be a milder case of COVID. In the end, milder cases have fewer severe outcomes. So it's protecting the individual too by reducing the inoculum that they're exposed to. I don't have a perfect answer. I wish we didn't look like this. All right.
Thank you.
I am looking at it. I have to say that it's hard to do. I've classified every Middlesex County town by whether they have a mask order or not, and then tried to start looking at the data just to see, is it worth it? That actually is a really hard question to ask, given that every town is doing something different. So masks alone are not the only answer. And so you can see that in various ways. Okay, so as I'm starting to wrap up this presentation, I do want to come back to our local town, because our town is an ecosystem together. And what happens outside of the schools comes into the schools, what happens in the schools feeds back. So that it's that feedback loop we talked about earlier. So we are actually experiencing one of the higher periods of transmission that we have had since I started tracking these numbers back in August 2020. We had 49 cases reported this week. The only weeks that are higher are the 2 weeks following Thanksgiving and the 2 weeks following Christmas. So this isn't chump change. This is important. And we need to do what we can to help bring our town back down to where everywhere else is around us. Like I said earlier, the school data is our most up-to-date information that we have for our town, and that 20 of these 29 cases happened in the last 2 weeks is concerning when we go to look at next week's town numbers. So that is another indicator that I'm expecting another week of elevated rates next week. So given that we are experiencing this period of high community transmission, it's really critical that every individual, every student, every parent, every person connected to the school in any way, shape, or form can do the best they can to be careful. We saw an outbreak in Boxborough in one of their elementary schools, and you saw the town numbers go up, and then a few weeks later it came back down. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks it took to come back down, but it came back down. So if we are careful, we can do the same thing. So if we can dial back our behaviors and social contacts now, or be more careful, use our tools when we have our social contacts, then we can help. I think we can, given our vaccination rates, we will see a decline in the next 2 weeks. But we need a community level commitment to make that happen.
Katrina, quick question while you have this slide up.
Oh, yep. Sorry.
You have that slide up. So since those holiday peaks, we've added vaccination, but we now have a much more contagious variant. So to me, it would make sense that we're going to have more cases because we have something that's much more contagious. Do you have, or can you make available to us? I mean, I've got the data, but can we add it in, like some comparison of case severity from December and January versus to where we are October 2021.
You talking about hospitalizations?
Yeah, like we've gotten an additional layer because we've got vaccine now, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
But we also have, the virus is much more contagious. So to just look at cases, we need to be looking.
We are doing better with hospitalizations. So the fact that we're at 550 hospitalizations recently in the state of Massachusetts, when we were back in Thanksgiving and Christmas, I don't remember the exact number, but it was significantly higher, and they were pulling back care for other conditions. Like you weren't having cancer screenings, you weren't having surgery. They took away elective care, and there were the COVID units off site for COVID patients to recover in. So no, we're not having the same severity currently that we had back in over Thanksgiving and Christmas, but it's not, we actually don't have that much capacity. We have like 80% capacity right now in our beds. So we have like 20% to play with. And if cases get out of control across the state, then those 20% of beds fill up very quickly. Actually, we were there at the beginning of September. There was, we were near capacity in Massachusetts just not that long ago. So thankfully rates of hospitalization went down over the last month because we've gained back some capacity in that level. And the number of deaths have gone up. Like I know it doesn't seem like much to have 10, 11 a day, but when you add that up over a week, that's 70. You add that up over a month, just multiply it out. Like that's not nothing. So there is there's still some concern that when transmission, kids may not have the most severe cases. There's probably a few that might, but most kids will be fine. We know that. But it's when those kids can transmit. We've seen it. You can see it go through a classroom. You can see it go through peer groups. You can see it go through social networks. But once they start getting out to people who are at risk, we will start seeing the worst things start to creep back in. So yeah, we have to do better right now in order to get ourselves back in line with the rest of the state and the county.
Yep. No, I agree. I just thank you for answering the question.
I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. Okay, so we know what to do. We've been through this. So the main route of transmission of SARS-CoV-2 is primarily in the air that we breathe. People get infected through inhalation of the respiratory droplets and aerosols that hang in the air. It can remain suspended in the air for long periods of time, which means that you can walk into a room where someone who has been a case vacated, and if there's not enough ventilation of that space, then you could be inhaling COVID. Then the risk of infection varies by the amount of COVID virus that you are exposed to. So that can happen when inadequately ventilated spaces and concentrations of the virus build up in the air, when more particles are inhaled, so you have a higher dose that you've inhaled, and if you have prolonged exposure in any setting. So given our local trends, I do think it's important right now just to recap, and there's been some changes in some of the things we can do, and I want to quickly go through that tonight. So one of the main things you can do if you're having social gathering, hanging out with friends, whatever, is to improve the ventilation of the space that you're hanging with others outside your household with, or even inside your household. It's a key way to lower your transmission risk. So improve your indoor air by opening windows, running an exhaust fan, or using a portable air cleaner, or whenever possible, meeting outside. Virus particles dilute very quickly outside. So the more we can do outside, the safer we will be. The other thing that we should be doing is improving the quality of our masks. Masks are no longer in short supply. You can easily get surgical masks. You can get KF94s and KN95s and even in kid sizes. There was a randomized trial from Bangladesh that evaluated the community level benefit of mask wearing, and the results indicated that towns that were randomized to use surgical masks had lower rates of COVID spread than towns that did not wear masks. Were randomized to not wear masks. And then surgical masks actually performed better than cloth masks. So at this point in time, it would be great if people looked at their masks and to see if there's a way to improve that fit and filtration of their mask. And the kids' masks, especially in school where we know they have a lot of contacts. You can visit the CDC website. There's actually a really great guide they updated recently. And I will put this will end up in the packet when I give it to Dorothy, so this will be available. The other thing we've talked about is that early detection. So anyone can get infected. It will happen eventually to everyone. But the key is to, when you are infected, is to not be in public places where you can expose others and that chains of transmission continue. Delta is very contagious. You can infect 5 to 9 people depending on the setting that you're sitting in, or one contagious person can do that. So, and Delta is contagious faster than the prior variant. So before we were seeing cases start to pop up around day 5, we're seeing it around day 2 to 3 now, and before symptoms. So I highly encourage everyone to sign up for the school testing program. By consenting, you're signing up for the weekly safety checks, the symptomatic testing, and the test to stay testing. And I have to say, my one child has used all 3 modes in the last week, and it has been great, especially that test to stay. So if you have an unvaccinated child, especially, please get them in test to stay so they can stay in school. But everyone is eligible to participate. And given that we know we have breakthrough cases of vaccinated individuals, I encourage everyone to sign up. It just gives our nurses flexibility to test when they need to. And then in addition to testing in the schools, we do have more tools for us now. So you can still go get the PCR or the rapid tests via a testing center or a pharmacy, but you can also buy rapid antigen tests like the Binax Now over the counter. And I think these are really good tools depending on your social interactions. So what these tests tell you is, am I contagious right now? So you may not be showing symptoms, whatever, but if you're about to enter a party, a social gathering with friends that is very important to you and you want to go there, but you want to make sure you're not getting your friends sick, you can just, everyone take it, like, think of holidays. That would be a perfect use for Thanksgiving and Christmas when you're gathering with your extended family. If everyone took a Binax Now beforehand and everyone was negative, for at least the duration of the visit, you're less likely to have any transmission happen. Another way to use them is if you go to a large public gathering, something like a sporting event or a concert, or you're going to a birthday party, or even really want to do that sleepover. Everyone having a Binax Now, whether they're vaccinated or not beforehand, means that you're not having an infected person, a contagious person present who will infect others. And then also after that event, Binax Now comes in 2 packs. So do one before and one 2 to 3 days later to see if probably 3 days later to see if you've converted to a case after the gathering. And I do have to say these are in short supply. So if you want to use them, especially for the holidays, I would recommend getting them now or as soon as you see them and not waiting, because I think there's going to be continued. This is a tool that we will be using going forward. This is a tool just to keep in your medicine cabinet. It's actually been a great tool for to use especially if you're seeing someone who's older and at higher risk too. So I encourage everyone to start using these more frequently. And then our most effective and important tool right now is our vaccinations. They are all 3 of the vaccines we have available to us are highly effective at protecting you against severe disease, hospitalization, and death. A mild case still may be miserable, but you're less likely to go to the hospital, need to be in an ICU if you're vaccinated. Those are pretty low. Vaccinated people are also less likely to get infected. The rates are lower for vaccinated people. And if you're not infected, you can't spread COVID. So this is a way to help us to slow down those community transmissions as much as possible. You're also, your immune system, once you're infected and the virus starts replicating, your immune system starts to attack it. So you're infectious for a shorter period of time. And that helps to reduce spread as well. There is, Pfizer has been approved, FDA approved for ages 16 and older. And it also has the emergency use authorization for 12 to 15 right now. Moderna and J&J are both emergency use authorization for ages 18 plus. The FDA is currently talking about boosters, and it sounded like Moderna was FDA not approved yet, but they recommended approving the booster for Moderna. Tomorrow's discussion of their advisory group is about J&J and also mixing. So more information is coming out about these vaccines rapidly. And those 5 to 11 age group will be reviewed at the end of the month, like I mentioned earlier. So vaccines really are our best tools to protect individuals and also our communities and our schools and our sports teams and the things that are important to us. That is the best tool we have to get back to normal, as close to normal as we can get right now until everyone has a chance to be vaccinated. And getting vaccinated before the holidays, and we're talking early October right now, you could probably, if you got Pfizer, you could get vaccinated before Thanksgiving, be close to fully vaccinated. If you got J&J as an adult, you would be fully vaccinated by then. So getting vaccinated now is actually a great way to protect your family and enjoy the holidays with people you didn't get to do so last year with. And also don't forget your flu shot. So now that we're back socializing and sharing spaces again, flu is transmitting as are other respiratory diseases. So it's just really important to not forget that flu shots are also important to helping reduce spread and protect yourself from the flu. So big fan of vaccines here.
As always, extremely informative. I wish you had some more positive news, but you did have some good news on the fact that we're looking at possibly getting approval for 5 to 11-year-olds to get the vaccine. And our vaccination rates are definitely improving, but obviously some of the information you're giving us should give us a little pause and make us want to just take a look at the big picture and see what exactly is causing this spike. Do we have any other questions from other board members before we move on? Justin?
Yeah, just one. Thanks, Katrina. Nice job as always on the deep dive. Gives me a quick opportunity to be a COVID nerd here. You mentioned the Bangladesh study. So the last time I looked at that, it was not peer reviewed. And I'm just wondering, I assume it is now because you're referencing it.
Yep. I waited until it was peer reviewed.
Yeah. So correct me if anything changed. So surgical masks, there was a statistical difference.
Mm-hmm.
Did they come out and have a statistical difference for those under age 50 or cloth masks? Because the last time I looked at it, it didn't.
So this trial was not randomizing use of masks in children under 18. So masks were randomized for people 18 and older. Yes, the biggest improvement in risk was in older individuals. So community masking was protecting older individuals, but it was not statistically different for younger than 50. So there was still improvement in those rates for those groups as well. It just wasn't statistically significant.
Okay. All right. Just checking, make sure nothing had changed.
It wasn't a perfect study, but again, that's actually the first community level randomization that I've ever seen of that. So
sure. I knew you would know the answer. I mean, I hadn't looked at it in like a month. So you brought it up. I was curious. So thanks for always knowing the answer.
I don't always know the answer. I will admit that I don't always know the answer.
Like 80% of the time. You're good. 85.
I can be a know-it-all. I agree with that. Just ask my husband.
Excellent. Again, thanks, Katrina. At this point, are we ready to hear the Shaker Lane School Improvement Plan, or do we want to continue?
We're good. Michelle's ready.
Great. I'll turn it over to Michelle Kane to give our school improvement plan update on Shaker Lane.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm sure that Mrs. Principal Temple did a great job presenting, and we actually have been working together a lot. So I apologize if some of the target points are identical, but we are trying to make as a feeder school and a sister school, to be as aligned as possible. So some of this stuff is repetitive. The first two slides, if we could just have the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are specific things that we're working on. The superintendent had asked us to pick 2 target focal points for the year. And the first one we want to share is our cultural and community outreach. We're really focusing our community meetings on cultural appreciation. We just had our first one last week where we talked about welcoming everybody into our community. and we picked out how to say welcome in a bunch of different languages, and each classroom got a sign, and we're writing their names on the sign, and we have it hung up in our lobbies just to really appreciate different languages, different ways to say hello and welcome to Shaker Lane. Something new that we will be doing this year is Miss Deacon and I will be reading a monthly book that focuses on diversity, appreciation, acceptance for the A in heart. We have a picture book and a sign up that the teachers have started. So we'll be doing that once a month. I've also had a lot of classroom teachers share with me that parents want to share some of their cultural backgrounds, some of the things that they expose their children to, celebrations. So we're looking forward to that this year. And then as far as community outreach, we have worked with both of the two following organizations in the past, and we hope to do that again. The House of Hope is a homeless shelter in Lowell, and we have done a hat drive, a mitten drive, and we hope to reach out to them and do something this coming winter. And the Wish Project in Chelmsford, we've worked with them in the past as well. We did Mother's Day bags, and that is an organization that supplies basic needs to local people. So this focus for Shaker Lane is on cultural and community outreach. The next slide, I'm sure Cheryl talked about this, and the other principals as well. Social emotional supports, and not just for our students, but our staff as well. Starting with the students, social thinking lessons. Our school adjustment counselor, Ms. Diadco, has been going into classrooms and really teaching students, as Ms. Matherin did, her predecessor, on whole body listening, personal space, being part of the group. They haven't had to be part of the group. And I look at our kindergarten students who are 5 years old. This is, for some of them, this is their first time in an educational building, not having gone to maybe preschool or in a home daycare setting due to COVID. So she has been really working on, focusing on how to be part of the group, how to work together, how to appreciate personal space, and really focusing on whole body listening. You might hear the kids talk about it at home: eyes watching, ears listening, body still. The second one is morning meeting and closing circle. Again, we've been doing this for years, but again, really taking our time this year. We have noticed that the students this year, we talk about this a lot at our admin meetings, they're making great progress, but the progress has been slow. We're kind of where we should be, probably mid to late September, and we're in mid-October, but they are making progress. I think it's just going to take us a little bit longer this year. So the morning meeting, closing circle, taking that time to calibrate everyone, come together and build that classroom community. Our second step program continues to emphasize the class lessons on conflict resolution, problem solving, working together, identifying feelings, talking about feelings, role plays. The teachers are selecting books that focus on social emotional supports, more so this year than a year prior. Positive affirmations, mindful practices. I had the pleasure of reading an email from a kindergarten teacher today, and I apologize. Sorry about that. Am I still connected? Okay, it's a loose Wi-Fi, or sorry about that. A kindergarten teacher sharing, she's been working on this positive affirmation with her children, and it's, I can do hard things. And a parent emailed her. That's why I'm losing Wi-Fi. Hang on 1 second. Sorry about that. I have children returning from hockey tonight. So this teacher had talked about, I can do hard things. And the parent emailed and was at home and was trying to do something. And the parent emailed this kindergarten teacher and said, well, something is sticking with him because he was having trouble. And he said, I can do hard things. This is what my teacher told me. I can do hard things. I can do it. So that growth mindset, that hang in there, you can do it. Kind of mindset is what we're focusing on. And mindful practices. I was walking by a first grade classroom today, and a teacher was playing mindful music, and you could see the kids focusing. Some of them had their head down on the desk. Some of them were looking at the screen. So really just taking some time to pause, slow down, and move forward so that these foundational supports are ready for the rigorous academics that are ahead of them. And for our staff, we were the leadership team was recently talking about working on some self-care, stress management, and trying to work that into our staff meetings. So social emotional support's not only for the students, but for our staff as well. The next slide, we'll go into the school improvement plan. And again, some of this may be repetitive. So we are focusing on our Lucy Calkins writing program this year. We started, we had a single day PD back in the spring, but we are focusing on a 2-day PD today and tomorrow and a few other days, several other days this year. And I found the training with this person amazing. She was very hands-on, gave teachers a step-by-step walkthrough of how to really teach the program to the best of its ability. So I'm excited about this. The second program we just decided to bring this in this year. This is the Hegerty Phonemic Awareness Program. And this is a daily lesson where it's about 10 seconds. And what I'm sorry, hang on. I apologize. The Hegerty Phonemic Awareness Program is a daily 10-minute lesson where students have, they're focusing on phonemic awareness. So rhyming, identifying initial sounds, identifying final sounds. And this has been well documented that phonological awareness are prerequisite skills for reading. So we are excited to bring this in. We brought our phonics program in a couple of years ago. So I feel like we're really building that base for strong literate readers. Math curriculum exploration will start this year. I have several teachers that are going to be on that committee to explore a new math curriculum program over the next year or two. Diversified reading interventions. A couple of you, actually, when I first started, we brought in a program called the Leveled Literacy Intervention, and we found that it pigeonholed students into maybe one type of intervention comprehension. And what we found over the couple of years is we really had to diversify the types of interventions that we're offering. So our reading specialists are working to target those groups and bring in different types of interventions for them. Excuse me. This year, we are also piloting the Ames Web Dyslexia and Early Literacy Screening. We have training coming on this program next week. Ames Web is not new to us. We've been using it in our SST process and also in special education evaluations as far as reading and math. The Dyslexia Screener and Early Literacy Screening will also identify some students that may be at risk for this, and we can target those areas. And then Lexia, we did choose as a building to purchase this for all kindergarten students. Last year, this was free as part of an online program with remote learning. And although it's quite expensive, the teachers felt that this would really help. So we are going to have monthly meetings and analyze the data and see how effective and impactful Lexia is on our kindergarten students. We'll have every account, and we bought some accounts for first and second for students that are struggling. For professional development, the first two topics are a continuation from last year, working on our cultural proficiency and trauma-informed instruction, PD to come along in staff meetings and other times on our half days. Universal design for learning, we started this year, and that's across all of the schools, really creating a learning platform that is good for all students, that entry points that are good for one may be good for all. The Ames Web screening that I just talked about in the Dyslexia Screener is geared toward identifying at-risk students, monitoring their progress, and we are also bringing in safety care training, which is a preventative training on how to de-escalate children, how to work with them. I had this training in my former district, and I'm glad that we're bringing it on here. I think it's a great program to help students when they're struggling with regulating their emotions. Excuse me. The next slide. Community and communication. Through our weekly newsletter and Twitter, we continue to update those every week. And the Twitter account, I'm getting back on it. I think I was off the wagon last year. Our monthly community meetings, as I mentioned, we plan to focus them on heart and cultural focuses. Our Safe Routes to School partnership, we continue to partner with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. to promote safe walking and biking to school. We had our first safe routes walk to school last week. It was well attended by many families. And we continue to do compassion projects. In the past, we've done Anton's Cleaners. We've done, I think it was the Red Cross. So we look forward to doing some type of compassion project and giving back to our community. The next slide is climate and culture. So again, students and staff, for after school, we've had one staff activity, Kimball's, which is always a hit, to have some ice cream after school. We're looking forward to some other events for our staff to get together. At the beginning of every staff meeting, we always start with staff celebrations, and it's a chance for staff to recognize their colleagues and things that they've been doing, something they want to celebrate and share with the staff. Spirit Days, we have one every month. Next Wednesday is our Sports Spirit Day. The kids really like these. The staff like them as well. Shaky Storytime and Springfest we hope to bring back this year. Shaky Storytime will be an online event like we had last year. We had several staff members reading every 15 to 20 minutes, and families would attend. I believe we passed out hot chocolate, marshmallows, and some coloring pages. And then Springfest, if we can hold it virtually, outdoors, one of those avenues will be explored. We're also hoping to have a couple of coffee and conversation with our staff in the morning. Just a chance for us to get together. We used to do a Friday breakfast once a month. And while we miss that, we know that it's just one more thing. So we're hoping just to bring a coffee and have a conversation and get together. Excuse me. And staff appreciation days, Ms. Deacon and I do plan several of these. They're impromptu throughout the year. We've come around. We called it the Whoop Whoop Cart, and we came around with drinks and snacks, and staff could sign up. They had a little door hanger that they would check off the snacks that they want. So we hope to continue to celebrate and appreciate the staff multiple times throughout this year. And the last slide, I believe, is technology. We have some new Imaginatorium materials. We have a laser cutter. The amazing Mrs. McGregor had received a grant from Littleton LELWD grant, and we have creative tools for both Shaker Lane and Russell Street School. It is my hope, and I'm excited to do this with a second grade classroom in the next couple of weeks, is to do a weekly newsletter podcast where the students you'll hear from them. I know you all read mine every week from start to finish, but I think it will be neat to hear some kids' voices. So Mrs. McGregor and I are going to work on having students do a little podcast for entertainment of the parents. Excuse me. We also have an Adopt a Bot program, which is really cute. The teachers are adopting the bots that are being retired because she has a whole new fleet coming in, and they've become like the classroom pet. So they adopt this retired Ozabot, they give it a name, and it's part of their classroom. We also have applications and tools in the classroom on iPads and Chromebooks, such as Dreambox, Prodigy, RazKids, and Lexia for some. And then Mrs. McGregor and other tech staff in the building will be doing ongoing tutorials and have PD opportunities for technology. I think that is it for Shaker Lane. Welcome to answer any questions.
Any questions from the school committee?
I'd just like to note that that Michelle noted that she fell off the wagon, but she was talking about, not say a lot of people did, I think, over the last year, but you were talking about Twitter use, and so I think that it's a little different. What is a laser cutter, and why does it sound so cool? And what do you do with it?
I almost took a picture and sent it to Steve and was asking him to show it. So it takes a material and it cuts it. So we have a little place in our office called Connie's Corner, and Heidi had made these letters. And it's almost, I think it can cut any material. I'd have to ask Heidi, but these are plastic, and she's made letters with them. So it's a machine, kind of like a 3D printer machine, and it can cut things and make things. So stop by.
Laser, that's awesome. Thanks for the presentation.
Very cool. Justin?
Sure. Michelle, you can do hard things too. You can present and be interrupted by your family. So nice job getting through that. Like we're a big Lexia family, or we have been. It's like nails on a chalkboard thinking of Lexia. but I heard that you have it for all the kindergartners, which I think is great, but just maybe for those that are struggling in first and second. And I was wondering if you'd report back to us if you feel like at some point you might need to expand that as the year goes on and you identify additional needs. And then I was curious about the dyslexia screening because I remember hearing about that. God, it must have been last spring. Sounds good, right, Brad? How is that going? Is that up and running? Have you, I guess maybe the appropriate word there, referrals? Have you made any dyslexia referrals? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can start, and maybe Beth could, Ms. Steele could fill in. So this has been talked about through DESE, I think since about 2018, 2019. It's been here, it's been discussed for a while. And this year they have finally said, all right, we are going to move forward with this screener to kind of catch students who may have tendencies to be at a high risk for dyslexia. We have our training with Ames Web next Wednesday on the 20th, and then we will screen students after. We're going to screen them 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. I believe it's about a 30-minute screener. There are different components to that. I haven't seen it yet, so I would defer to Beth if she has any information on what that looks like.
Sure. So Ames Web is actually, we're kind of getting a 2-for-1 deal here because we have to do a dyslexia screener, which we did talk about. And I think you were right in saying last spring is when we talked about it initially. And so in addition to the dyslexia screener, we also need to do an early literacy screener. And so Ames Web actually satisfies both of those requirements because it is an early literacy screener that has an add-on that is a dyslexia screener. So we're able to do both of those things with Ames Web, which just makes it a little bit more streamlined for us to be able to use one platform. So this summer and fall, Lynn Snow and I actually had a lot of conversations with each other, with others, with other districts, and with DESE, going back and forth about what are approved screeners that we can use, what do they look like. And so we actually were going in one direction and then we're kind of thrown a curveball. It was not actually going to be approved by DESE. And so we were able to pivot pretty quickly to Ames Web, which, as Michelle said, some of our staff is familiar with. So it kind of is a nice, it was a nice pivot to make, but we are getting the training next Wednesday. And then as soon as that training is over, we'll be able to start the screeners. We are still within the fall screening window. So there's no problem with regards to timing or anything of that sort. In a typical year, sure, we may want to do the screeners sooner to the start of the school year, but we're falling within that fall screening time, which will allow us to fall within the winter and the spring screening time as well. So like Michelle said, the actual screener is about 20 to 30 minutes for that early literacy screener. And then the dyslexia screener actually starts as being a teacher questionnaire that they answer, and they're able to identify based on their own observations and reflections. And based on the responses that they provide, it will flag for certain students potentially. And then that's where we dive in a little bit deeper. And Lynn, I actually don't know if you want to pick up from here as to when that gets flagged, yep. More testing would happen.
Yeah, so there's a couple of advantages with using Ames Web. Our special education staff at Shaker Lane are familiar with the tool. I am as well in my previous district. We used it both for universal screening as well as progress monitoring. So the special ed staff have been using it as a progress monitoring tool, which is helpful. So once we have the data from the universal screener for the early literacy screener, we're able to see certain markers in certain areas where students might have kind of atypical profiles. And we use that, and then we combine that with that 12 12-question questionnaire, which is the Dyslexia Screener. We use that in addition to the RAN, which is the rapid auto naming. And so there's correlations between the RAN and being at risk for dyslexia. There's students that might have an atypical score on the RAN that don't have dyslexia, but at least having that information then informs us to be able to then make a referral potentially to do a full evaluation for those students for special education, where then we would do a full eval and really determine and look deeper and more comprehensively at their entire kind of cognitive profile, their achievement profile, and where the issues lie, and either rule in or rule out a specific learning disability or dyslexia.
Great, thanks for all the info. And I'd be interested to kind of hear more. So maybe after you get through a round or two, like we could put it on for a spring topic again, but be great to get an update on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Ms. Kane. I appreciate the update on Shaker Lane. And we're going to go back to new business, and Dr. Clenchey is going to give us an update on high school vaccination rates. Hold on.
I think that's Miss Snow. I'm number 3. Miss Snow is number 2.
Okay, sure. So I have some slides. The presentation isn't necessarily in the same order as the agenda is. So if Steve can jump to the slide where it speaks to the high school vaccination rates, if that's what we want to talk about first. I think it might be slide 11, possibly. One more. So there we go. All right. So this is what our current vaccination rates look like at the high school. So for staff, we are at 78.3%. 58 out of 74 total staff have provided their vaccination info to the nurse to be entered. And currently we have 60.3%, creeping up slowly, but 60.3% of our students, 272 out of the 451 total, which then puts us at 62.9% for the high school. And so right now we're just tracking staff for the other schools. I did go through and look at all of the students who are over the age of 12 at the middle school. We wouldn't have gotten, even with, if every single one of them was that was eligible was vaccinated, it wouldn't have gotten us to that 80%. So right now we're not calculating that 80% number for the middle school, but we are entering all of the students who are vaccinated into our health portal. But the staff at Littleton Middle School, 98% vaccinated rate. So 58 out of 59 total staff. Russell Street is at 85%, 62 out of 73 staff. Shaker Lane, 94%, 79 out of 84. And Central Office has 12 out of 12 staff. I will say some of these numbers are double counted. We have staff who work in multiple buildings, so they are reflected on multiple school lists. So those denominators might be a little bit like inflated. We have a speech therapist that works across 2 buildings. We have a physical therapist that works across 4 buildings. We have an occupational therapist that works across 2 buildings. So they're all reflected on all of those lists. But that's where we're at for vaccination rates.
All right. And
Lynn, I have a question. So under students for Littleton High School, the 272 out of 451, that's the percentage of, so the denominator there is the number of students in the high school.
Yep.
The numerator,
total students in Aspen. Yep.
The numerator is the number of, families who've reported their student vaccinated. Is that right?
Yes, it's correct.
So the remainder of those, which is at 100, 80 or something, right? Are people who have not reported anything, or people who've reported their student unvaccinated, or what?
Not reported anything.
Has anyone reported their student unvaccinated?
Not that I know of. I think it would just be an assumption that
Okay.
There are nobody is, not that I'm not aware of, nobody has actively called us to say, my child is not
Yeah,
vaccinated.
that's fair. That wasn't really the call to action, so that makes sense. So for those 180, if I'm doing my math roughly correct, are people who just haven't reported either way. They could be people.
Right, yeah, some of them may be vaccinated. We just we haven't received their cards. Or an attestation for us to be able to confirm in MIIS.
So I'm just looking at the numbers here, and it looks like to me we're almost there for faculty. I mean, it's a total between the faculty and the staff 80%, but one more staff member would probably bring us to 80%, and it looks like 90 students would bring us to 80% there. I think we have it, judging by what we've seen in the reports from Katrina on what our numbers are for that age group. I just think it's a matter of getting people to report in. I think some people might be hesitant in regards to getting to 80%, and what happens then? Do we just remove the mask? So we're going to talk a little bit more about our steps if we do get to that 80%. I think that's not the only data point that we're going to be looking at, certainly. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Clenchey, and he's going to give a little bit. Timlin apparently has a question.
I just have a quick question, Lynn. Did you see a jump in returns after last meeting when we started posting on social media?
There's been a little bit of an increase. I mean, it has not been a change in great magnitude, but definitely the number has been creeping up. I run the reports periodically, and I'm like, oh, we're at 58%. Now we're at 59. Now we've bumped over to 660. So there has definitely been they're still continuing to trickle in. I believe that they probably will still continue to trickle in as well.
Right. So just looking at the numbers 2 weeks ago, we were at 51%. We're at 62% now. So probably about 45 or so, 40 or so people have turned in their vaccination information since then. Brad, I see you chomping at the bit.
I do want to congratulate and thank our staff for being vaccinated, reporting their vaccination at such high levels throughout the district. But especially it seems at the middle school and others in central office and the other schools. The high school it's almost 80%. And so just thank you to staff and everybody for doing that. My question gets back to kind of Jen's question about incentivizing or getting people to turn in these numbers. If our assumption is accurate that the vaccinations are out there among the student population, and I come back to this notion of test and stay. I think the idea is that students, they may not want to, if test and stay is the incentive to stay in, but if the student is vaccinated, then they don't have to participate in the program in order to benefit from test and stay. Is that correct, Lynn?
So while DESE has put out that they don't need to, or it's not that they're necessarily recommending it, I think our position is a little bit different. We would like everybody participating in the program simply because we have seen a number of breakthrough cases. It does give us the ability to collect additional data, which is always helpful. And it gives us the ability to also rule in and rule out for symptomatic cases. So it's if a student comes in and they're vaccinated but they're symptomatic, we're able to do a Binex now and either confirm, maybe they have the flu, maybe they have a really bad infectious cold. We don't want any of those in our schools if it can be avoidable. So it's definitely just a really nice tool. Well, I'll talk about the program a little bit after we get through this.
Well, and so I was thinking back Jen's point and Timlin's point about how do we incentivize, how do we encourage people who probably have someone who's vaccinated in their household, how do we get them to report it to us so we have more data, more information? That information we got earlier that we don't have from elsewhere about the number of breakthrough cases percentage and the advantages of being in the program and being tested as part of that. I think that's some information. I don't know if we don't need more emails about it, but when we're talking as individuals, as community members with our friends, that may be something to mention to folks as a way to encourage them to participate.
The principals have also been speaking to classes and groups, encouraging them and sharing and talking about the benefits as well.
Any other questions before we move on to the process of achieving 80% and what that means? No? Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Clenchey.
Thanks, Matt. Steve, could you put my slide up, please? Thank you. We had a pretty good idea that we wouldn't be at 80% by the time we had the meeting tonight. I did send an article out to you earlier this week. My apologies. We had a number of articles that went out. But the first high school in Massachusetts was approved for having vaccinated people have a choice in wearing masks. When we're developing this process, and it's really difficult to contain stage 1, stage 2, et cetera, because we have other partners that we need to think about as well. In that article that I sent to you, the state was very clear that if they found that a community and school numbers that were giving vaccinated people a choice to wear masks didn't look good, they have the authority to come in and mandate masks for a period of time. So there's another decision-making authority there. I would hope that in any community, including ours, if we ever went in that direction, that we would have done that prior to having them have to come in. But that was kind of an interesting additional layer. At the last meeting, we talked about the fact that the Board of Health really should be involved in setting some of the targets, ones that would be common to the community. And the first two that I have on there, and again, these are just for your consideration, transmission rates, community regional data, orange high, I should say orange substantial, high is red. At what point, if we use that as one of the data points, would we consider either if it was below orange or orange, would that trigger a greater comfort level if we had 80% in a school to take a look at choice for vaccinated people to wear masks? Second data point that I mentioned, COVID-19 case rates, community regional data, we could use the colors again, orange, red. If you're orange or you're below orange in case rates, is that the appropriate time where there's a comfort level? And again, I think that's a broader discussion, because the consistency in the town and in those two data points, if that's something that we're going to entertain, I think is very important. It doesn't make sense to have the school department take a look at those two data points if we're going to use them, and have the town as a whole use a different target than we are. So I would encourage us to make sure that we do have that conversation with the Board of Health. The next potential data point would be number of positive COVID cases in a school or over a 4-week time period. I just picked a 4-week time period. It just seemed to me to be strategic when we look at quarantine periods, where infected people need to stay in their residences, for example, in isolation. School-based clusters, maybe another data point to consider. And it's really hard getting somebody to determine whether you have a cluster or not. We're kind of waiting for a medical expert to give us a final word, whether that phrase is appropriate for what we experienced in one of our classrooms this week. We've sent in communication to two entities and are awaiting some of their advice. But we do know if we have a number of cases within a classroom or within a grade level, that's certainly something to be concerned about. A little harder to pick a particular target or number or range because it's so situational. In-school transmission is another factor that we could consider. I think it's an important factor as well. It's not black and white. Again, some of these data points are easier to determine, whereas the ones closer to the bottom are situational to a certain degree. And then the mass COVID-19 dashboard, which I provided a link to, and I've sent you that link the past 2 weeks, so you can see that data that we have in the state as a whole. There obviously could be more data points. Those are the ones that came to mind as I was thinking about how we could start facilitating this discussion this evening. I don't know how you feel as a school committee. One target or data point to consider is, I'm not sure whether that's the best way to go when we have other data points that in my opinion are very important in making those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I think Dr. Quenchy, I know that myself and Justin have reached out to Board of Health members and are looking to identify what data points we should really use if we're talking about unmasking for vaccinated students at the high school and maybe eventually the middle school level. But these are all appropriate.
I mean, in an ideal situation, it would be nice if DPH, at least for the top 2 data points that I've listed tonight, would come up with some consistent advice for us. I think that would be helpful for every community in the state. When I referenced the insertion of a paragraph in that letter that I sent earlier this week about that first high school, I guess a question I have personally, if a statement like that is put in, they must have some idea. I would hope they would have some idea of what the tolerance level would be, or the litmus test would be in terms of transmission and case rates in a community where they feel it would be safe to have vaccinated people unmask or have a choice to wear masks. So I don't think we're going to get that, but that would be very helpful.
Does anyone have any other questions for Dr. Quenchy?
Kelly, I had a question.
Sure.
So we're talking about Hopkinton, right?
That's correct.
Okay. How do they do it? So the way that Hopkinton did it is, when you read the headlines, it looks like no one's wearing masks anymore in Hopkinton. That's not the case. Basically, the superintendent filed the attestation form with DESE, and the form went through. They checked the box, and the superintendent then referred it back to the school committee for a future decision because they now have an option. So we don't even have an option. So I'm not sure that we should even discuss any of this stuff until we have an option. I think we're just kind of wasting our time. So I'm wondering if we know how Hopkinton achieved 80%, because clearly we have 80% within our town.
Right.
Did they access the database? Did they just collect forms? I'm just wondering if they used some sort of strategy to verify 80% that we haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any superintendent talk as to how that was done?
Not at this point in time. There's very limited things that can be done, Justin, when you're dealing with students. You can request and ask and encourage, but that's the limit. I did, or we did more correctly, email the state and DPH about the access to the MISS system that we have that is not to be used to determine vaccination rates. Mass DPH did write back to us with that stipulation. So if any districts out there did do that, they shouldn't be doing that. And I don't believe they did, but we just wanted clarification on that because it is an easy data source to look at, but that data bank is not supposed to be used for that reason.
Okay. That was kind of my question, is did they do their own detective work on their population and just figure it out themselves? But, we can talk about this like ad nauseum, but until we achieve 80%, my thought process is then it's appropriate to start talking about it, because the data is going to change. If we get there in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 16 weeks, we're going to be talking about we're probably going to feel different about this. So I'm happy to talk about it. I just think to spend a lot of time on it at this point in time might not be worth everyone's time.
I think, Justin, the only thing to consider is somebody's going to have to start talking about data points since we have a town mask mandate. And I think it would be to our advantage that we be involved in that conversation. As I've said before, the Board of Health does have jurisdiction if they enforce mandates for the entire community. They do not, and you know, they realize this. They cannot just create a mandate for a school district. It has to be community-wide. So we have a community-wide mandate. Do we want to be part of that conversation and helping shape perhaps those 2 data points? And my recommendation is I think we should, because those data points, if they're considered and they decide what is safe, would be the data points we would most likely have to use.
Sure. And again, we're all happy to talk about it, but my understanding is that unless DESE changes the 80% rule, and if we don't get to 80%, we're not involved in the conversation. Just masks are on in the schools. If Littleton decides not to remove the mask mandate or not change their mask mandate, they've already come out and said that they're not going to supersede DESE. So we could be in a situation where Littleton has a mask mandate, the schools get over 80%, we start talking data points with them, and then maybe we're not masked at school. But you know, we're at 62.9%. We got a ways to go to get to 80%. Again, I'm happy to have the conversation. I'm just, to create all these data points when we're going to be weeks, if not months away from this. It's
the only thing, Justin, I understand what you're saying. The only thing it would do is if and when we reach 80%, we would have this figured out. There's going to be another time lag if we don't have this figured out and we reach 80% and we want to consider
it. I agree with that. And I thank you for bringing that up. I'm just not sure we're going to get there.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a quick question. I just have a quick question. Should we, as a committee, have a meeting with the Board of Health first before we discuss, like, before we make points? I mean, Board of Health could turn around if we make 80% and they could turn around because we have a town mask mandate. They could say, no, we're not allowing you to do it. Even though, because of this town mask mandate, even though they said they wouldn't overrule DESE, they may I just think it might be better for us to have a meeting with the Board of Health and to see where their heads are at. And
that's something that
we're working on right now, Timolin, as far as just doing a kind of a non-quorum meeting at this time with myself, Justin, and 2 members possibly of the Board of Health to see, just kind of outline some of the data points we might be looking at. So in the future, we may be looking at a full joint meeting, but I think that's where we're at right now.
I just want to point something out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Board of Health is using the data that's reported by the state, right? The data from the MIIS database to make their decisions, I believe. They're not, I mean, obviously they're not asking citizens of Littleton to self-report whether they're vaccinated. Now, we're, according to what you just said, Kelly, we have to do that based on DESE's feedback. We have to go by self-reported data, which we know factually is not accurate, because if you compare the self-reported numbers to the state numbers, the self-reported numbers are being suppressed. I mean, maybe people just haven't gotten around to reporting their kids vaccinated, but more likely people are, to Matt mentioned earlier, nervous about what we might do if we get to 80%. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, that the data we're working with within the schools is self-reported and it's just factually inaccurate. So just, I think we need to be mindful of that and take that into account.
Brad?
No, the one thing I would say is that I agree with Justin. We don't need to be kind of litigating and debating, 4 weeks at this standard or, 3 weeks at this or this threshold. But I do think it's important that we just demonstrate to the community that it's not if and when we hit 80%, that immediately the vaccinated people's masks can come off at the high school. Is that we as a committee will look at more than just that one number. And Kelly, and so I think this is, you're right. We don't have to figure out what the exact thresholds are tonight. Seems like, unfortunately, we have some time before we're empowered to even consider making a decision. But Kelly, to your list of criteria, I think those are the right ones. I would still want us to formally say that we're going to be looking or be very interested in what the pool testing data and the participation rate is. After last meeting, I was thinking, I'd love to have a clear look at what's happening in the schools through that data. So to the list that you already had, another one I would want to add is just the pool testing data, or what is it's not pool testing or whatever we're calling it now. That will be another factor I will want to consider as we make decisions, if we're ever empowered to make decisions about whether to authorize people to remove masks at the high school.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great addition, Brad. And our presentation tonight is from Lynn will certainly give you a little more idea of where we're at. We are getting more participation. We're going to continue to encourage people to take part in the program. And again, the purpose of even putting this on tonight's agenda is I'm getting questions. I know some of you are getting questions. We needed to start this discussion and determine what kind of direction. And with Matt and Justin and myself, we thought it was important to approach the Board of Health and start this discussion. We want to be working together with entities that have any involvement in making a decision so that we're on the same page. The worst thing we could do is have different criteria than the Board of Health. And we're trying to do the same thing, keep people in our community safe, as safe as we possibly can. So thank you, and we'll look forward to having that meeting with the Board of Health so we can start this discussion.
Thanks, Dr. Clenchey. That brings us to our last order of new business, an update on the safety check program. Lynn Snow will give us an update on the safety check program.
Thank you, Brad, for setting the stage, because I will go through our participation rates. But just to get started, if you can move to the next slide. Oh, one thing that I'll mention first, I just want to piggyback on what Katrina had said. I think one of the factors that we need to be aware of is that, there is spread that's not being measured. We were one of the districts that thankfully we were able to launch our program pretty early. There are a lot of districts that are still getting their programs up and running. So there's just less testing data available for some of the other school districts. So I think that's why we're seeing a little bit of what we're seeing. So then just to kind of move into updates to the safety check program, can you move to the next slide? One of the updates that just came out on the 7th, which is maybe hopefully something that will have some of our younger students, or even our older students who might be hesitant to participate in test and stay. Right now, the Binex Now and the COVID safety checks are administered at school by trained staff. For staff and students in grades kindergarten and up, both tests may now be conducted by self-administration and observed by trained staff. So for the Binex Now test, the trained staff must process the test, which means that they have to conduct the process of inserting and turning the swab in the test card kit, closing the card, reading and reporting the results. But for both the Binex Now and the swabbing, the students are able to self-swab with the supervision and oversight of the trained staff, whether it be the school nurses or the CIC program testing staff. And so one of the other things that I wanted to mention too is, what are the options if the Binex Now tests for the positive pool members are all negative? All the negative Binex Now tests, they would likely indicate an individual of lower viral load. So if this occurs, Littleton would conduct a second Binex Now test on all the individuals, no sooner than the next day, but within 2 days, to either confirm that it as a false positive, and it would it would then kind of negate and would be counted as a negative. So you can move on to the next slide. So the current collection method, can you go back one slide? Did we skip over one? No, okay, maybe it's coming up. Oh, yep, go back one. So what are the next slide? Okay, so Littleton Public Schools, their current collection method, we're doing a pool testing with lab-based follow-up. It's the 2-sample collection. So 2 samples are collected at the school. Both specimens are transported to the lab if the pool is positive. The individual follow-up testing is occurring in the lab using a second sample that was originally collected. The samples are collected through a nasal swab. They must be collected at the school. The students may collect through observed self-collection. The samples are processed at the Broad. A maximum of 10 samples are included in each pool. And so in this model, there are a few things that need to be in place for the program to be effective. There needs to be short turnaround time for the pool test results. There needs to be good pool test capacity, ability to do rapid reflex testing, and a robust reporting system. So we can go on to the next slide. One of the limitations that we're seeing is that the CIC's lab partners are currently experiencing unprecedented volume, causing a delay in the time that the results will be made available. So at this time, we've been told to expect that results may be received between 36 and 48 hours from the time of testing. So what we have done to counteract that is we're conducting reflex testing. We ran into this with a positive pool that we had. There was a delay in receiving the in-lab. So it almost makes us, well, it caused us to pause and to say, we're extending a lot of bandwidth to collect that second swab. But if we're not getting the results of those individual second swabs quickly and efficiently, then we could be creating exposure. So that's something that we have been discussing and talking about. So with this particular positive pool, we had done the second swab and we still had to conduct reflex testing. The purpose of the second swab was to not have to do the reflex testing. So if you can move on to the next slide. So actually, one of the associate director from the Shaw Foundation reached out to me because we have been one of the districts that has been pretty successful in their program, in participating in the program since the origin of it. So they had put out the opportunity for us to consider shifting to using the Veritas lab, because they have now launched a single nose swab, which will then go through a deconvolution in the lab for any positive pools. So what's nice is that the turnaround time is 24 hours from the receipt of samples at the lab and an additional 3 hours for any deconvolution result to identify the diagnostic positive. It would be done at school using our normal swab collection process. The swab collection would be no change. We would still continue to write the name and date of birth on the tube. We'd be scanning the code. So all of the processing on this end, there would be no really change, except we'd be dropping the second swab, and then the process of processing that pool would be different. So this is an option that we're considering because it might create efficiency, which would streamline the collection. We wouldn't have to collect the second swab, which is really the most time consuming. I mean, that's what we found from last year. Doing just the single swab pool collection, it was pretty efficient to do that. Adding the second swab has been pretty labor intensive because they all need to be individually labeled. And we're having to, verify and ensure that the right swab is going in the right tube and the label's going on. So this is something that we're in the process of considering right now. We're just waiting to get a response on whether or not should we determine that we pilot this, we try this, and we want to be able to shift back. We want to know that we would have that option. So I'm just waiting to hear back on that. Move on to the next slide. So as far as our testing program participation rates, we're pretty commensurate to where we were at the end of last year, which is great. Our denominators are somewhat changed because last year we had students who were either remote or, in other schools, our enrollment looks different. But as far as looking at the percentages, as of October 2021, for staff, we're at 63% participation rate, students 50% participation rate. So overall, we were at 52% participation rate. At the end of the school year last year, we were at 47% participation rate. I didn't use a denominator for staff only because it was a little bit of a moving target. So I just didn't include it. But it gives us kind of a rough estimate to see. So for Russell Street, we are at 58% participation for staff, 64% for students, overall 63%. Littleton Middle School, 34% participation rate, 56% for students, overall 53%. The middle school last year was at 56%. So we're pretty close on. Oh, and Russell Street was at 63% in October. At the end of the last school year, we were at 66%. At the high school, we're at 63% participation rate, 45% for students, 47% overall. So across the district, for staff, we're at 55%, 53% for students, and 54% overall. Where if we looked at that at the end of the last school year, our participation rate was 53%. So we're pretty close to where we were last year. We already went over our vaccination rates. A little bit more info that I just wanted to share was just to, this was sent out to all of the families just to remember the COVID-19 symptom checklist. And I just encourage everybody to remember that the school nurse needs to use their discretion about whether or not a student may be attending school. The school nurse will contact parents to discuss the student's health-related illness. We can go on to the next one. And so symptomatic students, any student who exhibits symptoms as per the district's sick policy should remain at home. If students exhibit symptoms consistent with being at risk for COVID-19 and have consented to participate in the district COVID-19 testing program, we will administer a BinaxNOW rapid test. Symptomatic testing is used when a student's showing symptoms of COVID-19 during school. Some symptoms of the virus look identical to other illnesses like the cold or the flu, and the BinaxNOW test tells us whether a symptomatic student has COVID or not. Regardless of the results, you will be contacted to pick your child up so that your child may recuperate from their illness at home. If you have any questions, please refer to the district health protocols and the COVID-19 symptom checklist. You can move on to the next slide. One of the other updates that came out from DESE is they gave us a little additional clarity around mild symptoms. So the protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios does refer to mild symptoms. And so they gave us some more information as far as what symptoms are considered mild. So the operational definition of mild symptoms refers to any single isolated symptom on the list below if the symptom is also mild. If a symptom is severe based on the clinical judgment of the school health professional, even if isolated, then it should not be considered a mild symptom. And so that is cough, sore throat, nausea, vomiting or diarrhea, headache, fatigue, or nasal congestion or runny nose that is not due to other known causes such as allergies. And again, just to emphasize, please understand that the school nurses do need to make clinical judgments and they need to use their discretion. And they are always going to err on the side of caution. I think that might be my last slide.
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Snow? Justin?
Thanks very much for the information. Lynn, how does this compare to other towns, that we would kind of hold ourselves up against? Like, are we good? Are we not good?
I don't know. We've been very busy in Littleton, so I haven't really been comparing us to other districts. But what I do hear anecdotally is that we are doing really good with our testing. We're doing a great job with our testing program. We were able to start very early in the school year. We were able to roll out fully. There were many districts that are only rolling out certain elements of the program. We were able to move forward with all three components, which has been great. The nurses have been absolutely amazing. I think that many communities are lagging with getting their programs up and running, not due to anything other than just the sheer volume of CIC not being able to scale up at the rate. And I've heard just anecdotally, my sister works at Weston High, and I know that they had difficulties getting their program started up. I know another community that has gone through multiple program coordinators, and so that impacted their ability to get started up. I think we're in good shape. I think that we're catching the asymptomatic positives, which is extremely helpful for the district, because, you know, the worrisome thing is that, you know, some of our younger students that may be going around asymptomatic, they may have elderly relatives. They may have a relative that has autoimmune or some other type of condition that makes them at risk. So us being able to do the test and stay, us being able to do the pool testing to catch those asymptomatic positives, that's hugely helpful. So I would really encourage everybody to participate, because as Katrina said, the Binax Now test, they might be in short supply. They might be in even shorter supply as we go through cold and flu season. We're not in short supply right now in Littleton. We have plenty of supplies on hand, and we want to be able to use them. So we want everybody to be participating that can.
Okay. Yeah, because this kind of doesn't jive with the rest of the town. So we have an extremely high vaccination rate. We have, you know, folks that potentially are, you know, maybe not turning in the vaccination status because they're pro mitigant strategy. It doesn't kind of make sense that these families aren't participating. I'm just kind of wondering what's the issue. Did we have to deny anybody test to stay because they were not enrolled in the program with the amount of cases we've had in a couple last weeks? Or
well, if anybody, they would never be denied. So if anybody wanted to be able to participate in test and stay, they would be given the opportunity to immediately complete a consent and participate.
And then they're in.
I would like to answer that, Justin, just so you're aware. We did have several families opt into it that weren't initially in the program.
Okay. And now that they're in, they're in.
Yeah, we wouldn't, if we had a positive pool and there were students who are not enrolled in the test and stay or not enrolled in the program, we would immediately allow them to fill out that consent and have them participate in the test and stay. There would be no, oh, we need to wait or next week or anything like that. No, they immediately are able to fill out the consent.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And then, I mean, the high school is probably going to be your most challenging population because you do potentially have a high vaccination rate, and the rules are a little different with vaccinated versus unvaccinated. But I'm kind of scratching my head as to why the three other schools aren't much higher. I don't know. And then Jason, you got to pick up the slack with the middle school. I mean, the numbers are just the worst. I'm kidding.
He's got the best vaccination rate for his staff, which is
well, there you go. That's a correlate. That makes sense.
Yep,
high vaccination
absolutely.
rate, low test. I get it. Thank you for pointing that out.
You know, any 13-year-old that does what they're told or asked to do. We fight just a general early adolescent thing all the time. So we're trying. All
right. Good. Okay.
I have a question, Justin, if you're done. So kind of piggybacking off something Justin was asking. So I get that, like, if there were close contacts that were not enrolled in the program that said, "Oh, we want to test and stay," you said, Lynn and Michelle, they were then able to immediately enroll in the program. But I'm assuming that means they then were opted in to all three components of.
That's a great question. That question has come up a couple times. Parents reaching out saying, "Well, can I participate in the test and stay, but I don't want to participate in the other aspects of the program." Participating in the test and stay helps you. Participating in pool testing helps us, helps the district. So that's why we really are expecting, and we really have chosen to, if you're consenting to all aspects of the program.
Okay, and just to clarify, and I personally, my kids are in all three. They're in the full program. I believe in that, and I would strongly, for anyone who's listening, encourage everyone to opt their kids into the program. But I just want to, just to be clear, understand that decision to group them together and make it all or nothing. That was a Littleton decision, right? That's not a state mandated decision.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Brad?
Yeah, I'm thinking like my colleagues here. The number that strikes me is the 54% overall, and it gets back to our earlier conversation. If we want to be as confident as possible that we're getting as clear as picture as possible before we make any kind of decision, if we're ever granted the authority to make the decision about masking, Lynn, you said we're catching that the program's working really well in Littleton's compared to other places. I have no doubt that's true. And also have no doubt that the state didn't prepare to meet the caseload adequately. But and I'm glad we're responding to that and coming up with this alternative plan. But 53%, you said you were confident that we were catching asymptomatic cases. We've caught some, but if we're only looking at 53% of the population, that's a net with a lot of holes in it.
Yep.
I just, like Jen was just saying, I would just encourage everybody in our community to help us get a clear sense of what's happening in our schools so we can make informed decisions.
I do think just if we can, not that we want to be going back to going through down memory lane of last year, but we had a slow roll with everybody participating and signing up last year as well. And I think there were a lot of families that kind of wanted to see how this unfolded. I do think that we have some really positive results to share about the program. Now parents are starting to see test and stay is working. We're able to do it. It's helping. And so I'm hopeful. I'm always cautiously optimistic that we're going to see more and more increases. And things are going in the right direction, slowly. Like I just ran the report again for the high school vaccination rates. There's 3 more. So now we're at like 60. They're trickling in. So we're at 63.4% right now at the high school. So
it's like a telethon, right? During the course of the meeting.
I'm checking the numbers all the time.
Right. And so, it is in some ways, if the glass is half full, it's encouraging that we've already reached the level, pretty much the level school-wide, district-wide that we reached at the end of last year.
Right.
But it's still, we could have more information if people were to participate, and that'd be really helpful if they felt comfortable and if they would do that.
Okay. Thanks, Lynn. This brings us to our second section in the meeting for interested citizens. I would just ask that any comments be kept within around no longer than 3 minutes. And we'll turn it over. Anyone in the audience have any questions, Dorothy?
We do have one moment. Okay. Erica Podgorny, please state your name, your question, and your street, please.
Hi, Erica Podgorny, 6 Fox Lane. I would just say that, you're encouraging people to submit their information and encouraging people to sign up for the testing, which I fully agree with the testing part. But I think it's unfair to ask parents to submit their information without knowing what you're going to do with the information. So you're saying that, once we get to 80%, then we'll decide what we can, what factors will determine whether we unmask or not. Well, I think parents have the right to know what those factors are and make decisions about how they feel about it too. The other thing I would like to say is that my school district, the participation in the testing program is one of those factors that they're looking at. So in order to unmask, not only do they have to reach the 80% and get approval from the Board of Health, but they also want to reach 70% participation in the testing program. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, anyone else, Dorothy?
Matthew Ridge, please state your name, your street, and your question, please. Matthew, you muted?
Yeah,
There you
give me a second. Matthew Ridge, 325 Great Road. There's a little misconception here, and I don't mean to hound on this, but the FDA approval for the COVID vaccine is Corminate. It is not the traditional what has been allowed for the through the EUA. The problem is that medication is only acceptable inside the EU right now. I'm not going to get into the argument of the variant difference between the two because there is a legal argument going on between this, and I only have 3 minutes. The point is that any of the medication that is getting approval right now will not be fully approved or have fully tested until 2023. This is actually verifiable on the clinicaltrials.gov website. This is not my opinion. This is 100% fact. And the reason why they're not having complete done testing on it, and the reason why this original approval was done was only after 6 months of testing. They saw that nothing really bad was going on. They said, "Okay, good. We'll put it on as like one of the first trials." Now, my issue is that everybody is saying we have the government saying that everything's mandated, everything's this, executive orders, yada yada yada. And the problem is that as we have seen with executive orders, they don't have teeth unless Congress and the government actually gives them teeth. And right now we are running through rules and regulations that have not been given teeth. OSHA has not given authorization. The Board of Health, all this other stuff are expecting it to go through, but we have already seen executive orders denied because of the fact that they overstepped their bounds. This ruling that Biden has put out is one of those rulings that I believe will be overturned ultimately because of the fact that it oversteps many bounds. And we need to be careful of this because right now we are seeing a lot of people afraid of what is going on. And as you have claimed yourself today, that people are not actually possibly giving the full reports out if their child is vaccinated because they're afraid of the 80%. Once they hit 80%, what's going to happen to their child who is immunocompromised, who is whatever? And the thing is, we have to worry about our own children. They have to worry about their children, but we cannot be punished for people whom are going to hold us hostage for that situation. And we need to be careful of this because this is going to be a forever thing if we allow it to be. We need to come up to a conclusion where we are going to have an end date. We are going to have to come to a conclusion where we are going to say that this is the end. If people are still worried, we will take you into consideration. We will take you we will take you and help you and make sure your child is educated so you feel safe. So you feel that your child is safe. It is not fair for the minority, the people who are afraid of their child getting sick, for the majority of the children, for the adults who don't. And this is what I'm afraid of right now, is that we are always about the what if. My question isn't the what if. It is when are we going to end this? We are always going to see COVID, I'm afraid. This is going to be like the next flu. We are going to see shots. We are going to see extensions. We are going to see whatever you want to call it. And are we going to constantly have to be wearing masks in Littleton for the rest of our lives because some minority is afraid? The health board knows this. You guys know this. And you've even said that we have seen breakout cases. We've already shown that people who have had the shot will get COVID again. So why are we saying when we hit? What happens if we don't? When are we going to say enough is enough? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate the input. Thanks for keeping it succinct and moving on. Do we have anyone else in the audience, Dorothy?
We do. Sandra Santos, please. Santoro, I'm sorry. Please state your name, your street, and your question, please, Sandra.
Hi, my name's Sandra Santoro. I live on Nagog Hill Road. I'm just calling in to say, so my kids are both in the pre-K class that had the outbreak, and they haven't been in school since Thursday last week. We didn't find out they were close contacts till Tuesday evening. So there's a significant delay in finding that information out. And I have COVID right now. My daughter and son both have COVID. My daughter is immune compromised. So I really feel like disappointed and let down at the lack of uproar in this meeting right now, and everyone more concerned about lifting mask mandates than protecting my children who have a right to go to school. I just want to say how disappointed I am. That's all.
Thanks, Sandra. Appreciate the comments, and I hope you all get well soon. Anyone else in the audience, Dorothy?
Yes. Ina Landsman, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, Ina Landsman, 27 Lawrence Street. So, we're obviously having a lot of cases in Shaker Lane. And a lot of us who have children in Shaker Lane are quite worried. So I'm heartened to hear the discussion today where there is discussion of testing, how can we improve testing and so forth. And what I'm wondering about is, since we are having so many cases at Shaker Lane, and I suspect the answer is yes, but is there going to be an effort made to get more parents to sign up for the testing program, just to catch all those asymptomatic cases before they snowball? And that's my question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Dr. Quencher, Ms. Snow, do you want to, or Michelle?
Sure. I mean, we're certainly going to continue to encourage. I really believe the situation that we are currently dealing with certainly gave everybody a pause in terms of our safety check program is valuable and helpful in catching any positive cases as quickly as we can. And we're hopeful that we will see more people sign on for that reason. I mean, the fact that we were able to catch 5 asymptomatic positive cases because of test and stay is quite incredible. We never had that available to us last year. No district did. So, I mean, we can keep talking about the positives of taking part in this program, and the program itself has a lot of merit, and I think that will help as time goes on.
I'd like, if I could just respond. I think that we as a committee are, all of us on this call are in lockstep with the fact that we all want more people. We want to get to 100% opt-ins for the testing program. I think we're all surprised at how low the numbers are. To Justin's point, it doesn't add up. Consider the other data points in our town. I don't understand it. I have been racking my brain trying to figure out how to, what can I do? I can post on my social media, which, and in the different Facebook groups that I'm a member of, to get the word out. I think there's been an uptick, as Lynn Snow said. So I just want to make sure that you and other people on this call understand that we all agree 1000% that we all want as many opt-ins as possible, and we'll continue to do what we can. But at the end of the day, it's individual families' choices whether they want to participate or not.
Can I just jump in on that too? So I think everybody on this panel probably hears from the community a lot, geez, can you do a better job with increasing the numbers? And we certainly would be happy to just, share your ideas with us on how to get that done. And if you're not going to do it for yourself or your own family or the class, do it for the staff. The staff goes to work every day, and I'm thinking of the Shaker Lane staff. I mean, there's more cases than I've ever had, and they're all going to work tomorrow, and they're trying to figure out, they're like, who has COVID, maybe who doesn't have COVID. And if they were at, 80, 90, 100% participation, I think they'd feel a lot better, because it'd be a lot more negative tests. than a lot of holes in the net, as to Brad's analogy. So if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your kid's teacher, if you don't mind. Everyone would really appreciate it.
Well, all good points. Appreciate that. Dorothy, who's next on the line?
Greg Tez, please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Comav. A few comments, and I'll keep this really brief.
Greg, I'm sorry. Could you say your street again, please? Not hearing you, Greg.
No.
We're not hearing you, Greg.
1 second. Can you hear me? Or sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Better.
Okay, sorry, just took off my earbuds. I apologize for that. So 117 Whitcomb Ave.
Thank you.
I just have a couple comments I'll make just briefly. First, with regards to pool testing, I think the number absolutely has to be higher. And as I think Brad pointed out, which is really important, that means you're losing 50% of the potential cases, right? And I would hope that the percentage of people opting in would be a consideration if removing masks ever was made. Secondly, with regards to some comments made earlier about turning in your vaccination cards, we've turned in our information, and I would hope the community would do that. But I think one thing that's hurting the school committee right now is that there isn't full transparency with what you're going to do with that information. If you want the people to trust you, you have to be fully transparent. And I think having some of those conversations that Dr. Clenchey mentioned earlier about what that criteria would actually be need to happen. Otherwise, people just won't trust the school committee. So I would hope that you guys would be forthright and just come out with what those considerations are at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Duly noted. Okay.
CRM, please state your name.
Hey, Matt, can I respond to that? Because I think, Greg just said, and Erica mentioned that earlier. I think we're trying to do that, and maybe we're not doing it well enough. Obviously, to Sandra's point earlier, we're not communicating maybe as well as we should, just how deeply we care about the health of our students and their families. That's true. That's why we want more testing, why we want more people to be vaccinated. But to Greg and Erica, I think part of what we're doing is we're, Dr. Clenchey prepared, hey, these are things that we could be thinking about. We said these definitely are things we should be thinking about. Let's talk to the Board of Health about what specific metrics we should be looking at and what we should be doing. And then I suggested, and others, hey, we should also look at pool testing percentages, as Erica suggested, and she threw out the number that her school district is using, 70%. It's just that we don't talk about this outside of public meeting. This is our process. We're going to have at least, obviously the next 2 weeks or maybe 4 weeks before we ever came close to the number. My hope is that, my expectation is that this process will continue. We'll hear from concerned citizens such as yourselves, and you'll help us make this decision. We're trying to be transparent. That was the whole point of that part of the conversation, is it's not just going to be a toggle if we ever hit 80% that we make a decision. That just opens the door to the possibility of making a decision, one that we'll base on a more holistic look at the district and information we have. I wish we had more specific information, but we just haven't had those conversations because we respect open meeting laws, and we want to work with the Board of Health. If that's not satisfactory, I understand, but that's my read of the situation. I don't know if the other committee members feel the same.
I think you're pretty accurate there, Brad. Like I said, Justin and I are hoping to have a meeting with members of the Board of Health prior to our next meeting, and certainly prior before we would ever consider lifting any mask mandates. So we want to identify those data points. We're very serious about it, and I don't think it's really even on the table to just using the 80% as the sole reason to lift any mask mandates. But like I said, as we come upon more information, we do plan on sharing it, and we'll give updates at our meetings. But as Brad stated, we are limited by open meeting laws, and we can't just speak out on certain things that are happening within that time period. I've probably had 3 or 4 meetings since the last time we've had a public meeting. So
Matt,
it's a process.
My point, Matt, was not that each of us are having conversations with other people in the community, and you maybe with more official town bodies, but we as a committee, we're one thing. If we do anything well, it's we observe the letter and the spirit of public meeting laws. We don't have conversations about this stuff outside of public meeting. So if we're going to develop, as I think Erica and Greg and others are rightfully asking for, metrics, or at least we're going to consider these categories, we don't have those conversations unless we're together with folks watching. So we all agree, as we talked about tonight, that we should have these things. We're just not in a position to announce them without this kind of maybe messy kind of discursive feedback loop. And so like hearing that number that another district is using 70%, that's really helpful. Maybe that's over the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. That's where we land. Maybe we land a little higher. Maybe we land a little lower. Maybe we figure out we're going to be 3 weeks at Orange or 4 weeks at Orange, or I don't know. These are all things we're going to be thinking about. And so if you want, I think the clearest sense of what we're thinking about things we'll be considering will be that slide that Kelly shared earlier, and we're adding to it already. Again, I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know if it's satisfactory, but that's kind of where we are, I think.
Thanks, Brett. We'll get back to CRM.
I just pile on that for one quick second, Matt. Sorry. I want to thank Erica and Greg for your calls, because I didn't necessarily consider that me saying tonight, geez, let's not talk about it until we hit 80%, that was potentially bothering some members from the community. Like, that hadn't crossed my mind. So yes, I'm as I shared earlier, we're all open to the idea, and if that's what the community wants us to sort of put the data and the metrics and the ideas out in front of this, by all means, we're happy to do it. I think just myself, along with many others, we're just, we're frustrated at this point with the topic, and we know the data is there, but we can't collect it. And so thanks for the calls, and I've changed my stance on that. We'll get out in front of it.
Well, in last year, Justin, you'll recall, I mean, it was, Chairman Fontanella kind of led us to not get boxed in with saying this number or this number will lead us to, because then the question was toggling to full remote or staying into hybrid mode. And we never did, and maybe to the frustration, maybe the legitimate frustration of a lot of the community, we never said if we hit this number of cases, then we're going to do these things. So we didn't have the whole if-then statement set up. Maybe since we're talking about this very particular kind of masking, and really in one school, it's more appropriate to have the checklist, to have the box, instead of asking for people to trust us to look more holistically and to have the conversation in public. Maybe that's where we end up, and I would be fine with that if it is.
All right, we good? Okay. Do we lose here?
We lost him. All right, we'll go with Lexi Yang. Please state your name, your street, and your question, please.
Hi, Lexi Yang, 7 Mary Shepherd Road. So just 2 thoughts. The first, in regards to the pool testing, completely agree that we need to see more people enrolled in the program. I'm wondering if you've considered using the robocall system to let people know about the program. I think there's probably some email fatigue. We get a lot of emails from the schools. They're all really informative, but I'm sure some of this information gets lost in the shuffle. And so trying something different might be really helpful for those who aren't necessarily on social media or reading through all those emails. My second thought is just around the number of cases in that pre-K program. I think that is really concerning that there were 7 cases in one classroom. And I'm glad we're doing pool testing and we're catching some of these cases through that program, but I think we need to also be considering how do we prevent these from happening in the school in the first place, not just notifying people when there are positive cases in their classroom and that they're a close contact. I recognize that distancing more in a school where all the kids are in school full time is really challenging, but there are times when kids don't have masks on, when they are eating snacks, eating lunch, and I think we need to reconsider the layout, the structure of those times, because that's what I can't, obviously, I don't know, I'm not there. I don't know exactly when this is happening, but I would have to assume it's likely when the masks are off that there's more transmission. And so I would hope that we can rethink some of that, especially as the weather is nicer right now and they can't be vaccinated just yet, to give a little more space when masks are off. Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Lexi.
We have
It looks
another,
like-
someone who's already asked a question. Should we continue?
Yeah, if just keep it brief.
Okay. Oh. Ina Landsman?
Ina Landsman, 27 Lawrence Street. I'll be super brief. So I appreciate the response I got from several members in terms of testing, and I know you're working really hard at it. The other thought I had, in addition to Lexi's comment, was I wonder if it makes sense for teachers, sorry, my phone is just doing something, for teachers to send out a really brief email just explaining to parents why they may want to sign up. And, I'm happy to do a draft generic email. But, what I find is that if something comes from my student's teacher, I pay attention to it. Well, if it's a more generic emails, I may pay less attention to it. I just, for example, I was just together with friends from Sudbury and they got an email saying, look, sign up for this so we can keep our schools open. And they told me that they're at about 90% testing. So I think, sort of brainstorming and coming up with these different ideas, I think can really be very helpful.
Thanks, and I think definitely we got to think outside the box because there's no reason that those numbers can't be higher. Anyone else in the chat room, Dorothy, or
No more questions.
Lynn, you want to comment, Ina's?
Well, I just wanted to, on one of the earlier callers, they commented about a delay in the situation. I just wanted to correct that because there wasn't a delay. We received notification of the positive on Sunday. Contact tracing immediately began on Sunday. The nurse and Michelle and Rebecca worked the majority of the day on Monday. And we were in contact with the Department of Ed to determine that whether or not we were able to quarantine that classroom on Tuesday, which we did. All of the parents were notified on Monday, and we began the test and stay program that following day.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
One more question, another double.
Okay, yeah, as long as it's brief.
Sandra Santo, please ask your question.
Hi, this is Sandra Santoro Road. The families that were identified, the whole class was identified as close contacts on Tuesday evening. The class was closed Tuesday, but we weren't officially told they were close contacts until Tuesday evening.
That's correct. We needed to await guidance from the Department of Ed.
Right, so not Monday evening. And
Monday was a holiday. Monday was a holiday, and we did reach out to the Department of Ed, but we needed to wait for their response, which they did respond to us on a holiday, which we were very thankful for, so that we were able to do what we did on Tuesday.
Okay, so my kids weren't in school since Thursday, so that's I understand there's a process to go through, but in terms of like mitigating the spread, that's a big chunk of time. And
we were informed of the positive on Sunday.
Okay, another thing is the whole class was identified as a close contact, which I understand in preschool, there's some children, especially in an integrated classroom, that can't wear masks. But it's very concerning to me that children that don't understand what's happening and the parents can't see what's happening in class either. How is the whole class close contact? So I'm not even getting answers on what's happening in the class to know what happened, and it's really concerning.
So I absolutely understand your concern in that, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And so contact tracing in a preschool classroom is particularly challenging, especially given the developmental age, given that, students are in a preschool classroom are frequently prompted to fix their mask, correct their mask. There's a lot of close contacts with the teachers assisting with shoe tying, hand washing, hand over hand prompting for assisting. So when we really did the contact tracing and looked at it deeply, there was no way that we were going to be able to discriminate. And so we did make the decision to err on the side of caution and determine that all the students in the classroom were close contacts, which then allowed us to be able to have the students participate in test and stay.
Okay, so I would just wonder if there were ways we could make it better able to discriminate in order to protect the kids better.
I think being able to test them was the most cautious measure that we could take.
At that point, our whole family already had it.
Thanks again, Sandra. We wish you a speedy recovery and all in your family. At this point, I don't see any other hands raised. That would bring us to our committee reports. Any updates from PMBC?
No big updates. I know that Steve, just so you know, I know that we spoke with a company, one of the guys on the PMBC spoke to it, is going into design process for the high school roof. Company out of Worcester is doing it, I believe. So if you have any other questions, I'd contact Steve Moore. And that's it.
Thanks, Timlin. Budget.
No report.
Okay. Policy.
No report.
And CPAC.
Short report. CPAC hosted an Engaging Minds webinar had great turnout, and parents and families learned a lot about executive function skills that their kids can use at home and at school. And we have other things planned. As always, please reach out to our liaisons if you have any questions, or and check the Facebook pages and the official page. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Okay. That brings us to the end of our meeting. We do not require an executive session tonight, so at this time I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, second.
Motion made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Timlin,
Timlin Rossius, yes.
Jen,
Jen Gold, yes.
Justin,
Justin McCarthy, yes.
Brad
Austin, yes.
Matt Hunt votes yes as well. Everyone have a great evening and weekend, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Hopefully we'll have some more information. Take care.
Thanks, y'all.
Good night, all.
Good night.